Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And thank you. news, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast.
Welcome, folks, to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm just checking to make sure we actually have sound. We do! Good! I think we do. Anyway, I'm joined tonight by our two usual co-hosts. Say hi, Mark. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Jason.
All right. Anyway, tonight, as far as I know, we have no emergencies that will require us to either cancel or shorten the show. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because now something's going to happen. The house is going to catch fire. Something like that. We can actually have a full show for a change, and it's going to be awesome.
Well, the very definition of an emergency is something that can pop unexpectedly. So, we have the Coast Guard standing by because they're always ready.
They're always ready. That was our pre-show discussion about the Coast Guard, because Mark's from New Jersey. Apparently, that's a thing that you have to know about in New Jersey. Anyway,
Jersey Shore, though. I mean,
okay.
I spent a lot of time on the ocean growing up.
Okay, cool. So tonight, we're gonna go back to a little bit of basics. I guess it's kind of basics. It's maybe more advanced than like your average brand new newbie in the industry might be diving into. But we're going to talk about some basics of the cloud. And when I say the cloud, I just mean like public cloud providers. We're going to go into some terminology. We're going to define a few things. We're going to talk about some technologies that you're going to hear about if you're starting a journey into whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud or whatever, right? So go ahead.
Are
Mark.
you saying to break out the Uggs and the Starbucks because you're basic?
Sure. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with
the flat white. You're basic.
So I've got a huge list of various terms, some of which are going to sound very familiar to folks that are already used to on-prem data centers. And some of them are going to be very cloud specific, right? I'm trying not to go into anything that is specific to a certain cloud provider, though, right? So these are going to be all terms you're going to hear in one way or another across whether it's AWS or Azure, or I assume GCP, though I've absolutely never used GCP. Have either of you used GCP?
What was that second cloud provider?
Azure.
Azure.
Here we go with Mark making fun of how I say things again.
It's kind of a thing.
Because he's from Jersey. They say things weird in Jersey, and everyone else has to say it the same
I've
way, or they get made fun of.
Yep, damn straight. I've used the first two. I've never directly used Google Cloud, although I've certainly consumed stuff that I knew was on Google Cloud, such as the Holiday Hack.
Yeah, that's right. That's on GCP. Jason, have you used GCP? I don't think you have either. Have you? He's like, "Where's the mute button?"
Too many windows, man. Just so much stuff going on.
You got like a weird. Hang on, you got a weird buzz going on. What happened to your mic?
He's down with GCP, man.
What did you do?
I didn't do anything.
You did
Nothing.
it again.
I didn't do it.
You ruined something.
Didn't do it.
You were sounding good before. Now you're terrible.
I didn't change anything. Can you understand me at all?
I can understand you. There's just this weird buzz that comes in at this weird frequency.
You can fix it in post.
No, I can't. That's not going to be fixed in post.
I've sort of used GCP, not much. It was many years ago, and I've tried to burn those brain cells out of my head.
Okay. I mean, I guess the only thing I'm curious about is how similar is it from a technology standpoint, or I should say from an end user technology or interface standpoint, to the other cloud providers like AWS and Azure.
All three of them are vastly different. So, I mean, GCP, from what I remember, was incredibly different from what AWS and Azure had at the time. AWS has basically stayed the same. Azure has gotten slightly better, but not much. And I haven't touched, like I said, I haven't touched GCP in years, so I'm not, honestly not sure.
Man, your voice is getting worse.
It's like his equipment caught the COVID.
You can't switch mics, can you? Because we're already recording.
Yeah, but I can push buttons and see if it fixes it.
Try to threaten it or hit it with a hammer, maybe. I don't know.
It almost,
No,
almost
it's
sounds
an
like
expensive microphone.
It sounds like almost a little feedback loop.
It is
How-
weird.
How,
It's
about
a
if I
weird...
switch it like that?
No better.
No.
It was like when you unmuted, something went sideways.
I don't know. Better if I turn that off? Probably
Nope.
worse.
Exact same thing.
I don't know what to say.
Well, whatever you say, it comes through with
Sounds
static.
fine.
So,
It sounds fine to me.
of course, it sounds fine to you. It sounds bad. Maybe it's the browser. Can you? I don't know. If you, I guess
I'm
it
just
won't.
I'm gonna mark that Jira ticket as unreproducible and close it.
Okay, that sounds good.
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah, J Scar is reporting he hears the same buzz, which is not surprising since we hear it. Let's see here. Can I do anything from this end? I don't think so.
And Uncle Mark is not close to this mic or on another. So the problem, J Scar, is I am in a little bit of a super mellow mood right now because I'm at the very, very tail end of a bout with COVID. So I am probably not nearly as enthusiastic as you're used to. But I'll try to be a little more speak up-ish.
Yeah, I do not know. There's nothing I can do on this end, I don't think.
Dude, it was like bad cold version of COVID. It's fine. And I'll talk about that in chat, assuming we get to that. I feel mostly there.
Cool.
At the end of the day, things start to, I'm like, yeah, but that happens anyway, usually.
All right, so I guess we'll roll forward, and Jason, whenever you speak, we'll have an interference. And maybe at the break we can get it fixed. So unless you want to try to reload your browser, I know Riverside's decent about picking that back up again. Maybe it is a browser thing. It does sound like the browser problem you used to have on occasion. The same thing.
Yes, carry on. I'll try reloading.
It is getting worse, but all right.
Carry on my wayward son.
All right, so I guess we'll get started then, and we'll see if Jason can figure out what's going on, and we will pick up when he comes back, or he can pick up when he comes back. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was basically the different types of quote-unquote clouds, right? Usually when people talk about the cloud, they're talking about a public cloud provider like AWS, for example. But there's other ways that the cloud, quote-unquote, is defined. There's private cloud, which we could probably go on for hours about what exactly that means. But basically, a private cloud is a thing that's running in your data center, but it has the features of a cloud, right? So when I say features of a cloud, oh, Jason's back.
Does it work now?
You sound better! All right. So anyway, what I mean by features of a cloud is it's got like a self-service portal. It has the ability to dynamically assign things. It has the ability to like software-defined networking and whatnot. Products like OpenStack, I think VMware might have a competitor as well. They're what you'd consider a private cloud, right? It's hardware that you run in your data center, but it's not just your VMware cluster. Right? It's not just I've got a highly available VM cluster, therefore I have a private cloud, or I have physical machines that I manage myself. That's not a private cloud. The distinction there is that self-service portal, the ability for possibly an end user or an application owner to log into a portal, define themselves a system, attach networking, right? And there's no sysadmin racking and stacking to make that happen, right? Did I cover it well enough, Mark? I know you had feelings here.
So, yeah, I think it can be challenging to define what a cloud really is, right? Because for a lot of us in IT, let's be honest, and I tend to be one of the more cynical IT guys.
Never.
For many years, cloud has been almost an overused buzzword.
Yeah, I'll agree
And
with
when
that.
people talk about having their data in the cloud right now, that's even a little different than a cloud provider. My data in the cloud has become the common terminology for I have crap that's accessible via the public internet on some
Yeah.
probably third party storage, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that third party storage is most likely running on a public cloud or a group of public clouds somewhere, which is doing the actual back end work, right?
Yeah. So nowadays, right, it's like I take a picture on my phone and it uploads to some third party. Your average end user says, "Oh, it's in the cloud." I mean, they're probably right. It's probably on a cloud provider.
It probably is.
But they have
But
no
so-
real concept of what that means.
Yeah. So to me, when people are talking about a cloud, whether it's a private cloud, public cloud, or this hybrid cloud, which is like a Red Hat buzzword in a lot of ways, right? It to me, you've sort of insinuated it. It's about having a set of features and technologies, and
Yeah.
a lot of that to me has always been about the dynamic resource allocation and deallocation.
Right.
When I was at Merck, I actually played with a product that you could have empty servers sitting in a rack, powered off,
Mm-hmm.
and we were going to use this for for HPC stuff. You could have a job running, and if it hit certain thresholds, the controller would actually it would pixie boot a pizza box,
Uh-huh.
and across the network load a Linux image onto it, which was pre-configured for that application, and the rack would slowly light up as the load got higher and higher.
Yep.
And then when it was done its work, the systems would deallocate, and you could have different use cases for each piece of physical hardware.
Yep. And that's
and
that's sort of
and that's-
exactly the selling point of OpenStack, right? Because it has that automation, it's able to spin up hardware or
Now
virtual
this-
machines in an automated way like
Yeah.
that.
so that automated some level of automated provisioning. We talk about software defined a lot,
Mm-hmm.
where the infrastructure is code,
Mm-hmm.
where you basically have a recipe and say, this is what I want my data center or this particular application to look like, the stack that's running it, and you can produce that by running commands. So you've got flexible, dynamic, what appears to be hardware, and we could talk more about what it really is later, right? Along with the idea of, most of the time, you set a portal. It can be a web portal where a user's clicking, or it could be some form of automation
Mm-hmm.
that gets fired off by a deployment job.
Yep.
And that actually makes calls that do the provisioning. But in all cases like that, there is some API, application program interface, for those of you who are really new, usually done through some sort of web language, and those calls are sent, and the resources on the cloud are deployed that way.
Right.
So I think that type of functionality has become something that's really part of when we say a cloud, we expect the ability to automate via API calls,
Right.
regardless of what that might look like as an interface
Yep.
to the end
Yep.
user.
Yeah, that is key. That automation is definitely a key piece of it. So
Would OpenShift qualify as a cloud? Maybe. And I say maybe
OpenShift, I would
because
say.
we have that question in chat right now.
Yeah, I see it on the YouTube chat. So yeah,
Oh.
so
Oh,
OpenShift can qualify as a type of cloud service, I believe. And we're going to talk about the type that it is in actually just a moment. Pretty much as soon as we get through the different types of clouds, we're going to talk about the
Wasn't-
different as a services. Sorry.
Wasn't Rackspace running OpenShift? Or not
OpenStack.
They were running OpenStack.
Yeah, Rackspace helped develop OpenStack.
Okay. Yeah. OpenShift would be a platform as a service, as opposed to
Correct.
Yep.
the full blown
Yeah.
everything.
Yep. So let's get through the different types of cloud first. Then we're going to actually go right into the different types of services you can consume in a cloud, right? So we talked about private cloud.
Love the question though, Jeremy. Thanks
Yep.
for it.
Yep. Public cloud is kind of the same thing, except in someone else's data center. Usually, and not just like the guy next door, but a place where you can simply subscribe to a service and then you can utilize their cloud services. That's a public cloud, right? It's open to the public. As long as you've got a credit card that you can just kind of pop in and go, hey, I need, I need compute, or I need this, or I need that, and turn it on and spin it up, or make those API calls like Mark was talking about. That's a public cloud, right? It's not in your private data center. It's in a public data center somewhere else that other people can use. Not public like people can walk into it, but public like other people can log in and provision resources from it as well. And then there's this foggier definition of a hybrid cloud. And Mark, you hinted at this earlier. Red Hat pushes this a lot, but it is something that's worth talking about, right? So a hybrid cloud is this concept where you have a private cloud and a public cloud, both at your disposal, and your workloads are able to be spun up on either seamlessly.
And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or that it's not real.
Right.
In fact, it is the business reality for a lot of companies today. The
Right.
idea that some stuff they want tighter control over in their own data centers for whatever
Right.
reason, whether it be
Right.
security, whether it be they want to make sure they've got primo hardware versus stuff that is on a public cloud. Because public clouds, you tend to end up, it's like a public swimming pool, right?
Yeah.
Owning your own swimming pool is something I never want to do again because it's a money sink. It's a lot of work. And it's nice, right? Because you've got your own swimming pool, but you still got to maintain it and whatever. A public pool, if it's a decent public pool, fine, but sometimes they're not so great.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes what you're doing with a public cloud.
Right.
You're dealing with even, and one of the most famous is Amazon. Well, Amazon, quite frankly, a lot of unless you're paying extra money, you're running on garbage hardware.
Mm-hmm.
You're running on, white box, low cost, commodity disposable hardware.
Right.
Which means that things can just stop working. Now, most cloud services have the ability for things to be brought back up automatically, but that can be an interruption of service. So you have to engineer your stuff to be able to handle a crappy white box falling over.
Yeah. So in my mind, the real dream of public or of hybrid cloud has always been the workload that can burst into a public cloud when necessary, but primarily runs on a private cloud, right? And I've seen theoretical papers on how to do that. I've heard of technologies that can make it happen. I don't know if I've ever actually seen somebody doing this. I'm sure somebody is. I'm sure there's people out there doing it. I haven't seen it myself. But to use your pool analogy, it would be like you have your own private pool, and next door to you is a public pool. And when you have too many people for your private pool, you open up a gate that goes to the public pool, and people go from your backyard into the public pool, right? So, you've got an application running on your private cloud. Somehow the data is accessible in the public cloud as well. The application can be spun up in the public cloud very quickly and easily, and you have a load balancer or something in front of it so that when requests start coming in, you can route them to your public cloud provider as well, right? That's like the dream. Again, I don't see that in use that often, but it's a neat idea. I think it's a neat idea. Realistically, what people talk about when they talk about hybrid cloud is more like they have their workloads spread out across private and public resources, right? So they don't have a data center that has all their stuff in it. They don't have 6 data centers that have all their stuff in it. They have data centers and public cloud providers that they utilize sort of in tandem to get their services up and running, to make them highly available or whatever it is they need to do. It's funny, you're both looking the same direction as though there's a bird flying or something that you're both looking at.
Maybe there is.
Yeah. That's funny. You both got distracted by the same thing in separate zip codes. Anyway, all right. So those are kind of the basics, right? Private cloud, public cloud, and hybrid cloud, right? So any of the things we're about to talk about should be applicable to any of those three clouds, quote unquote clouds, right? And this is kind of that distinction where private cloud isn't just virtualization or hardware in your data center, right? Because it can't do some of the things we're about to talk about. I think that's kind of the key, right? The feature set is what gives you a cloud versus just hardware in your data center. So we're going to talk about a bunch of terms coming up. And basically each one of these, I think we would just define and talk about a little bit about what they do. And then we'll move on to the next, right? So first, I thought we'd talk about different types of services, right? And I don't mean like this is email, this is DNS, whatever. I mean sort of the methodology, or I guess the level of control you might get over certain types of services. And there's three major ones that came to mind when I started writing this. You guys can fill in if you think there's more that we need to talk about. And they kind of go up the stack as you're going, right? So imagine you have full control of a piece of hardware, right? That's privately owned, right? You get full control of the entire stack. Infrastructure as a service is one layer up, right? So imagine that you have your virtualization platform and you have zero control over the virtualization layer, but you have complete control over the VM that's running in it. That's kind of like infrastructure as a service, right? Infrastructure as a service is... Ogres have layers. So Amazon EC2, for example. OpenStack primarily is an infrastructure as a service. I don't know what Azure calls it, where you can spin up a machine and run an instance on Azure. I don't know what they label that particular product as. But, you know, you say, I would like a Linux machine, and they give you a virtual machine that runs Linux, and you have complete control over that box, right? And then you put whatever you want on top of that. It's not usually the most cost-effective way to utilize a cloud provider because you lose some of the manageability, perhaps, that your cloud provider likes to leverage to make it as cheap as possible. You're running a virtual machine. They don't have any control over what you're doing inside of it. All they have to do is give you the resources, right? So that's infrastructure as a service. Then there's...
And
go ahead.
Before you go on, I think it's important to note that, like, so for infrastructure as a service, it's more than just instances like compute machines. I mean, you're building networks. There's a lot, like if you look at AWS
infrastructure,
infrastructure as a service, like can be anything from
storage pools,
running a machine, storing things, talking to satellites, doing game development, like all of that stuff is all infrastructure as a service on some of the platforms. Not everybody supports everything. And as far as running a machine, and you say I want to spin up a Linux machine, you can replace Linux with virtually anything.
Oh yeah.
Provided that you can, if you can provide an image of whatever software you want to run or whatever operating system you want to run. So there are platforms like Linux, Windows, Mac OS, etc. There are also things like routers, switches, other such VPNs, etc.
Right. So by infrastructure as a service, it's basically like a virtualized data center is what you might want to say, right? You can run whatever you want on there. You can configure the networking within reason however you want. You can set up routes. You can set up IP spaces. You can set up load balancers. That's all infrastructure. But none of it is, well, I shouldn't say none of it's physical. As far as you're concerned, it's all software. It's all defined by, your input, and it's created, right? So one step up from that would be platform as a service. And this is a little gray, right, where you start talking about infrastructure versus platform. Platform is, I have code that I want to run, or I have an application that I need to deploy on a thing. The platform that you run it on would be something like maybe a container, right? There's probably other ways to get this done that would also qualify as platform as a service. But platform is more like, I have requirements for a piece of software. Give me a thing that meets those requirements. I don't care what's underneath it. I don't care if it's Linux. I don't care if it's Windows. I don't care if it's Mac OS or OS2 Warp, right? As long as it runs Python, has the libraries I need, and my application will run on it, I've got a platform to run my application on, right? Containers are a really good example of this because when a container is defined, it says, the container has this certain set of features, and your application utilizes the features. You don't really care what's beneath the container. You don't care what's hosting the container. You may not even care what the container was based on, as long as it has all the feature set that you need. What you lose with that is control over, that fine-grained control you might get over the network and over the operating system, and maybe you don't care, right?
Right, and to Jeremy's question, this is where OpenShift counts in as platform as a service.
Right.
And actually, I would argue that platform as a service, there's a fine line between this one and the next one up. But platform as a service is stuff like OpenShift, which is a container orchestration platform. Things like Java middleware, like a Java application needs to. There's enterprise grade middleware packages that let you run JVMs on top of them. So that would be a platform as a service, where again you don't care about the underlying operating system. You're higher up than that.
Right.
You need to run an application that requires, again, a lot of us in enterprise IT would consider this middleware. And yeah, in some ways, OpenShift is kind of like middleware.
So what you care about is, do I have PHP at a certain version? Do I have Java at a certain version? Do I have Python at a certain version? I don't know, whatever the latest, greatest programming languages are that people are using for development in these things. Yeah. Do I have MySQL and can I make it work, right? Those are things that would qualify as platform as a service. I don't care if underneath is Ubuntu, Red Hat, Debian, Microsoft Windows, whatever, right? I need a thing that runs this particular thing that I need to make my application work, right? That's platform as a service. And then the next level up is software as a service. And Mark was suggesting that there's a fine line here. I think it's a pretty distinct line, to be honest. If you have no control over the code or the application that's running, right? You subscribe to a service like Office 365, Google Docs, right? Google Drive, Gmail, right? These are things that I would consider software as a service. You pay a cloud provider or a provider in general. They provide you this service in a way that is self-provisionable, right? So, I've got an ISP. My ISP gives me email. I don't know if that email application would still be software as a service. I guess it kind of qualifies, but in my mind, it needs to be something that's self-provisionable, right? Gmail, if you register a domain with Google, you can say, give me an email domain, and boom, you've got your own domain hosted on Gmail, right?
Well, and so that's where, and the line there is, you could make an argument to me that OpenShift is software as a service because it's a very large application comprised of components that lets you run containers.
I guess if you really want to stretch it like that.
and if you're going to say, well, no, it's a platform as a service, then I would say, well, then Google Sheets is a platform as a service because you can write, ridiculous programming stuff around Sheets and
all my malicious macros run on Google Docs.
I'll tell you.
I get it, right? Yeah.
So that's why you sometimes.
Yeah.
And to put this to rest, I agree with your general distinction.
Yeah, I think that
service is. Yeah.
The difference is that platform as a service will let you run whatever your arbitrary code is to run an application, right? You can't run an application from within your tricky Excel spreadsheet, right? I guess maybe you could if you're really good at it, but it's not what it's designed to do, right?
Depends on the application.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I think, and you're right. There's gray areas in all these things, but I think that by design, right, platform as a service is meant to let you run code. Software as a service is meant to give you something that's already pre-built.
All I'm saying is that there are places in between.
Yeah.
Where it can sometimes be hard to say, where does this
look at
as part of the infrastructure or part of the platform or part of the software as a service. Most things are fairly easy to figure out, but there are some things that live in the gray.
like ServiceNow, for example. You ever use ServiceNow? I know you've probably heard of it. You've both probably heard of it.
Not
ServiceNow is like, it's almost like platform as a service, but it's also almost like software as a service. When you get ServiceNow and you try to set it up, it's not just like click, 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 and you have ServiceNow. It's, okay, you've got ServiceNow. Okay, get out a book and start reading about how to like write automations and whatnot in ServiceNow, because it's not plug and play, click and run, or whatever you want to say.
If you're going to run ServiceNow, you need to have people on staff who are dedicated.
Oh no, the Cylon's back.
Yeah, I hate to tell you this, Jason, but it happened again.
You're a smoking PSA advertisement for like when the guy puts the thing up to his
Yeah.
You don't want to run ServiceNow unless you have a dedicated staff. Also, don't smoke. It's bad for you.
All right, I guess we're just gonna have to live with it. We're too far in. If you have anything to say, Jason, just use sign language. We'll translate for you.
No, not that sign. All right.
All right. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about. Oh, then there's Mark as a service, which Jason I think added to the list here. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure what.
But
that is.
I don't want
That
Jason to
button you
define
press
it
every so
because
often.
he's gonna sound like a robot.
Yay! Yeah.
Now you're completely silent. Are you muted? We couldn't hear that at all.
His mouth is moving very fast. No words are coming out. Ah, I see.
You're actually like duplicated even. It's funny. It's not just you're echoed now. It's great. This is gonna be a nightmare to edit later.
This demonstrates the challenges with Riverside, which is software as a service. Oops, there he goes.
Riverside is indeed software as a service, which is the thing that we're using to record the show
To
tonight.
the Riverside. I don't think this is Riverside's fault. I think this is the saga of Jason's browser. Which
Yeah,
has behaved
He's had browser problems like this before.
forever.
Forever, yeah. So.
For the first time in forever, his browser effed him up the butt.
It has been a while though. It has been a while since he's had trouble like this.
Yeah, Scar is going to send one of his extra Raspberry Pis to Jason.
Yeah, right.
And there you are,
You there?
taking my name in vain again.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
J-Scar says he's going to send you a Raspberry Pi because it'll work better than your MacBook.
Oh, yeah, sure he will. Like you can get Raspberry Pis now.
No, you don't understand. He has 128 of them in his under his chair right now.
They're his children.
They're heating up his basement for him.
I need 5 CM32s or CM3.
I don't think he has any compute modules. He's got Raspberry Pis, man, not the fancy shit.
I can get them, but 5 compute modules right now would cost me $1,500.
He says he has 45 of them and counting. Are those compute modules, J-Scar? Because if they are, you got a client. Anyway. All right. Let's see. Okay. So that covers the as a services. Now we're going to talk about some of the basically components that you can utilize. A lot of these are, we're kind of going to go all over the place, right? Most of these are pieces you're going to talk about when you're talking about infrastructure as a service. But there are some of these that apply to the other levels as well. Software as a service is one of those things that you don't generally get a lot of control over. Platform as a service, you can have some control, and some of these things apply to those as well, or at least some of these technologies apply. Maybe they have different names. All right, so first we're going to talk about what?
This is where that gray area comes in, because you have things like ServiceNow that we would consider I would almost consider that software as a service.
Yeah.
But there's pluggable modules, and you can there's a ton of configuration.
Yeah.
Same with there's a lot of them. I mean, Office 365 is sort of the same, like where, yes, it's software as a service, but on the admin side, there's a ton of configuration that can be done.
So much.
Right. So I have these broken up into like generalizations, right? So compute terminology. Instance. One of you guys want to tell me what's an instance? Do you know what an instance is? It's an instance of something. In my brain, it's like an EC2 instance, but that applies to lots of things, right? Like it could be.
It's a VM.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, in the parlance of most public clouds, an instance is a virtual machine.
Right. You have something to add there, Mark?
Generated.
Yeah.
So it's beyond just a virtual machine in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
What makes an instance special is it's generally something generated from a template.
Right.
And then if you need another copy of it, you fire off another copy, and you get to define certain unique things about it, like its name. Oh yeah, the Breaking Bad episode where he's like, "Say my name." That was on tonight. My wife and I are watching through it again. Heisenberg, you're damn right. Anyway, but so the instance is not. It's not like an empty shell that you then install Linux from a DVD on.
Right.
It's generated from a template.
Right. I would argue that the term instance is used for lots of things, whether they are
Sure.
a platform as a service or a infrastructure as a service, to describe a thing that can be automatically generated when you click a button, right? So some people say when you start your own group in Discord, they call that an instance. A lot of people say it's a server. It's join my Discord server. It's really more like an instance. World of Warcraft or MMOs, right? You go into a dungeon that a new version of that dungeon is spun up for you and your group. That's an instance, right?
Absolutely.
Same concept.
And it's
just
it's a templated copy.
right.
It's
exactly.
Like, it's like you tear the piece of paper off the pad, and there's your fresh copy.
Here it is. Right. Yeah. All right.
Whoop,
so
there it is. Whoop,
and then
there it is.
Then we go to something very similar but different, a container. Right? So a container, I just did a talk last night at DEF CON 610 about containers and how they work. And
it's a process with an attitude.
Yeah, right. So a container is like a VM, but totally not. A container is, well, it's contexts and a file system that all contain a process, right? Which is kind of what Mark was getting at with a process with an attitude, right? That goes a little deeper than maybe some people care about, but just, I guess, a container is a predefined image that you can spin up and run things in, right? Or the image itself may be configured to run a thing, right? So you can have a container that runs an entire service that you've defined and you've stored in a registry somewhere. The point is, it's not an operating system that's running and that you can interact with like you would traditionally with a Linux or a Windows or whatever operating system. It's a purpose-built image that runs a thing and does a specific task, right? So it shares some of the similarities that you might define with an instance, but it's purpose-built and not general purpose, if you know what I mean. That makes sense? Did I just ramble too much there and really not cover it?
I'm going to be honest. I think we're trying. I don't know if container belongs on this list.
You think?
I think I love you, Nate, but I feel like you're trying to force it in there.
Well, then
because a container is not necessarily a cloud-based thing.
Well, it's a component that is commonly leveraged with cloud, which is why I've included it.
Okay, I'm just saying. That's how it feels a little bit. I don't know. And it generally can't stand on its own in most cloud services, from what I've seen. Like, can you spin up? Can you like take a container and run it on Amazon?
Well, so that's kind of my point, right? So most cloud providers will have infrastructure that will run containers in the same way that they have infrastructure that'll run an instance, right? Which is, in my mind, why it's a similar technology.
So I'm going to just Google run naked container on AWS.
Naked containers. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, that's what I would like. Container orchestration.
No, there's totally a ECS, isn't it? They call it.
Yep. ECS is the Elastic Container, whatever
service.
ECS
service. Anywhere.
Submarine.
Yep. And then there's EKS, which is the Elastic Kubernetes service, which also runs containers.
Yep.
Okay.
And there's variants of that with this thing called Fargate, which is basically the
But
sort of
yeah,
SAP side
you
of things.
you do have to do the whole cluster thing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like if
Yeah.
I just was going to set up a Valheim container, it would be so overkill.
Oh, absolutely.
It would be expensive because
Yeah.
if you run ECS to run a container, you have to pay for the compute of the system
Yeah.
in addition to the management of the containers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked into
So-
this
so
once.
You're paying for the machines.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not a cheaper solution. I thought it would be. It's
Yeah.
not.
I mean, I'm willing to be wrong with my assessment about whether container belongs on this list or not, and I don't want to drag us along too far.
You're
I
wrong,
could
Mark.
ver-
Moving
I
on.
could very well be wrong. Okay.
All right.
My understanding is that you can run native containers in GCP much
Yeah.
easier because that their entire system is basically contain. Even their virtualization is just containers
Yeah.
on the back end.
Yep.
So my understand like I've never really tried it, but my understanding is that if you're pure containers and you want it quote easy, you can go to Google and do it there.
Okay. Cool.
All right, Jason, did you put serverless in here? I know you were really interested in serverless at one point. That's why I just kind of guessed this was you.
serverless, I put it in there because it sort of falls into. I mean, the argument is that it's the next generation. You know, you've got instances, which are basically VMs. You've got containers, which are they're containers. And then you've got this thing called serverless, which is you just run your code without a server, which is bullshit. But,
Yeah, it needs a server somewhere.
yeah, there's a server. So all serverless is on every system that I've ever seen so far, it's a container.
Yeah, pretty
It's
much.
actually a container.
Yeah.
So, but what you're doing is instead of supplying an image or supplying the container itself, you supply the code. You just go into their code editor, you dump the code in, tell it what language the code is running in, and serverless will run that. So it just spins up a Go container or a Python container and runs.
And
that
if
code
you're
for you.
if you're a coder, there's nothing wrong with that. Like if you have no clue
No.
about
Yeah,
how to do
the-
any of the OS
What-
type stuff,
The
you know?
What you have to keep in mind is that serverless is extremely short-lived, right? So you can run servers and containers for years. You can run serverless for minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Which
that
makes
might
it-
be appropriate for your application.
It makes it much more cost effective, right? It runs a thing, it does a function, and then spits out the result and turns itself off, right?
Yes. So the I guess one of the better examples of using serverless, at least to me, is you're using it for APIs.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
each API function is a serverless, a Lambda is basically what they are in
Instance.
AWS. But serverless instance is what you do. So if you have a get data from the whatever, you've written code specifically. That's all it does, and you attach that to an API, what's called an API gateway. And that API gateway is nothing more than just a fancy. It's sort of a fancy Nginx setup that just puts the routes in there for you. So
Yeah.
whenever /getData is called, it passes that over to the getData function, which serverless function, which then goes out to get the data from, say, a database instance or something on the back end that's running all the time. That way, you don't need a server running 24/7 when
Right.
you only get hit, 10 times a minute or 100 times a minute, and it's extremely cost effective to do that.
If like the whole application is written that way.
Yeah, but even in instances where you do need to have a system that's processing things in the back end, you keep all of your non-user facing stuff on the back end in instances and containers and reduce your cost, and
Yeah.
then let things like load balancers, API gateways, and serverless lambdas take care of your front end to serve all of that to your customers.
Yeah, the only real problem I saw with this, at least when I looked into it, which is a couple years ago, admittedly, this may have changed in the past couple years, is that every implementation of quote unquote serverless seemed very cloud provider specific, right? So if you're using Lambda,
Vendor lock.
right? If you're using Lambda, for example, it felt like it would be difficult to move to a different cloud provider, and at the time, impossible to move in-house, right? Because there wasn't a quote-unquote serverless that you could run in-house. Now that's changing. I think there's work being done to make serverless functionality in OpenShift, which theoretically would mean it could be in Kubernetes, or maybe it's the other way around. But I don't know how compatible that would be with, I've developed an application that runs on AWS using serverless versus I want to move that to Azure, or I want to move that to Shift or whatever, right? So that's just like a word to the wise. If you start heavily leveraging serverless, you may end up locking yourself into a cloud provider.
And the containers that run that serverless code,
Mm-hmm.
and I know for AWS, but the containers that run that serverless code, AWS has those available in a registry to the public so that you can download them and test your serverless code. You could just run them on your own machine. It'll work.
Is it that easy?
You know, it is. Yeah, it's stupidly simple. So the secret sauce in AWS is the fact that they can get these to spin up incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Like in milliseconds spin up time.
Yeah, right. Because if the
scale,
if the function to get data from your database adds a couple milliseconds every time you call it just to spin it up, that adds up over time, right?
Right. But if you're in your own private cloud, honestly, why are you looking at serverless? You own the machines. They're going to run 24/7 whether you want them to or not. Because there's no turn a machine on. I guess you could if you wanted to, but
there could still be benefits to better utilizing the hardware you own, right? So, having that big honking monolith of an application up and running 24/7 when it has peak times and valley times, right? It's probably better if you could spin pieces of it down. But you can't do that when it's a big monolith because it's all running in one big code base, right? But if you have it broken up into these little tiny pieces, you could possibly save power, let alone compute resources and memory and CPU and all that stuff.
Again, you'd have to be shutting machines off, but I mean, you
well, no, right? So
with microservices,
an idle machine by today's standards uses less power than a fully loaded machine, right? So even if you're not turning it off, you're still saving electricity, especially if you've got thousands of machines, right? So,
but if you build a proper microservice architecture, serverless, in my opinion, doesn't really come into it.
Right.
It really makes more sense in cloud providers where you're charged, like when there's money on the line and you're charged for these things. Serverless sort of makes sense in a public cloud, but on a private cloud, I would just microservice it, containers, proper scaling, and you'll be fine.
Right. All right. The next grouping here is network terminologies. I only put 3 in here. Jason, you may have a bunch more because I know you're a lot deeper into the networking side of this stuff than I ever have been. One would be a load balancer, and this isn't cloud specific, right? On-prem, you'd have something like an F5 load balancer that load balances things. In a cloud provider, that's generally just software defined, right? Now, maybe they've got something like an F5 in the background, but you can just click some buttons, you get a load balancer, you don't care what's backing it. And usually what that load balancer will do is point to services that are called from within your cloud provider, right? So you'd say, my load balancer is here, this microservice over there is behind this load balancer, so when you call it, it goes over to that particular microservice. Or, this big honking web application that runs in this big monolithic instance of a EC2 instance, right? And that's essentially what those get done. And of course, it can have several endpoints behind it so that it will balance the load across several of them, right? So that's exactly what a load balancer is for. Jason is feverishly adding terms that I don't even know that. Yeah, I guess I know these terms. All right, the next one would be a floating IP. Now, this term, when I first started poking around at cloud, I'm like, what the hell is a floating IP? Does it move around on me? No. Yes, but no. A floating IP is basically an IP reservation where you say, this is the IP address of, say, a service, for example. And then that IP can be attached to several different things, not at once, of course. But, if you've got an application on this particular IP address, you've got an EC2 instance, for example, behind it, you reach it through the IP, you get to the EC2 instance. The EC2 instance will have its own IP address, but it could change simply by spinning it down and back up again, or by spinning up a new one, right? And the whole idea of cloud is that you don't have to treat your instances as handcrafted things. They should be spun up and easy to destroy and rebuild, right? So the floating IP gives you a static endpoint, sort of like the load balancer could do, that you can then get to your application with, right? So if you spin down that instance and spin up a new one that's running the same application, the floating IP points to the new one, and no one knows that the backend service ever changed. So that's essentially that's what a floating IP is.
Your machines in I know in AWS and Azure, and probably in Google as well, but your any instances you spin up are using private RFC 1918 space. They don't have public IPs by default. You
Right.
can set them by default on some of them, but then those are static public IPs, which means that it's directly attached to that instance and you can't move it. Once you spin that instance down, that it's a pool of IPs. When you spin the instance back up again, those public and private IPs they're random. So like I said, it's a pool.
Right.
So your virtual IPs or your floating IPs or whatever term you want to use for it are public facing static IP addresses that you can attach or point to a specific instance.
Right.
You know,
So
just
you
like
set
said,
these up.
it's so that yep.
You know, you'd set up your DNS to point to this IP, and then you'd point this IP at wherever the live
Right.
backend service is running.
Yeah, and some of the services, I think you can do this in Azure. I know you can do it in AWS. There's DNS trickery that you can use with aliases.
Tricksy
Where-
hobbitses.
Where it I can speculate on how they do it on the back end. I don't know for certain, but basically you create a DNS record for mycoolthing.com and you tell it to alias that to a service or an instance or there's a whole list of things that you can alias that to in AWS, and then automatically if the IPs on that instance or on that whatever service you're pointing it at change, it'll fix DNS for you, so you never actually have to know what that is. Not really good to use for things like EC2 instances. Great for load balancers because load balancers come with they come with like really long, hard to remember names, and the when you alias it, I mean, to me it looks just like a C name, but when you alias it, it comes through and gives you a usable name.
All right, and you added a bunch here. So virtual network, I could probably take a stab at this, but you may as well just go ahead and tell us what a virtual network is.
So, I mean, a virtual network is exactly what it sounds like. It's a virtual network. So you need a place to put your instances or to put your databases or whatever infrastructure you're running runs on a network. So the virtual network part of it is setting up your network, setting up your subnets, your routing, all the bits and bobs that go in with networking. You've got security groups and network ACLs that you can put on them for security, that sort of stuff. And then when you build an instance or spin up a container or run a serverless, whatever, you're going to tell it you're going to be on this network. This way you can keep things segmented, and you can have internal networks, you can have external networks, sort of the same way that you would do on like a on-prem network.
Right.
Then we've
Network
got,
isolation. So I want to skip ahead for just one point, just because you mentioned security groups, but you also have firewall in the list here. Is there a difference between a firewall and a security group?
Yes.
Okay.
So it depends on the service, but so a security group is your traditional ACL that you'll have on like a Cisco router. It's a stateful. It's essentially a stateful firewall, but it's layer 3, typically. So you can allow in on IPs, and it'll automatically do the reverse for you. So if you say you can come in, that outbound traffic will be allowed to that same IP that started the connection, and vice versa. But it's very low level, layer 3 stateful IP type firewall. Network ACLs are similar, but they're not stateful. So network ACLs are if it's not in the ACL, the traffic doesn't flow. So they're good for opening up. They're good for saying large swaths of known addresses. So I'm allowing this internal network to this internal network, and you put it as a network ACL, and that will catch everything else, and then you can use the security groups just to fine tune different connectivity.
Then the thing we skipped was WAF.
Yep, WAF is a web application firewall, which is it's a layer 7 firewall specifically tuned for web stuff. So these exist in a lot of different flavors. The cloud providers generally suck at this. It's like the lowest common denominator WAF that you can get.
Oh dear.
So Amazon's AWS WAF, for instance, yes, you have a WAF instance. Congratulations. Go write all your own rules. So you basically have to spin up a rule set for it. The last I heard, I haven't dug into it recently, but the last I heard, Azure's WAF was, and they may have improved this, I hope they have because it sucked. Azure's WAF was in a Windows server running IIS and mod security. Which is, mod security is great, but it's I mean, again, lowest. It's like the lowest cost thing they could spin up and say we have a WAF.
We have a WAF now.
No
Yay! I feel like we're gonna have to have a follow-up episode where we describe the OSI model because you're talking all about the different layers, and I'm wondering if people are getting all that.
So layer 7 is just like the application that you see at the end.
Yeah.
And what it means by layer 7 is that it understands it understands how the application is supposed to work and what data can be sent and received from it. That way you can write rules that say, if this sort of behavior is not allowed.
Right.
And when we're talking web application firewalls, that application is not the website that you're running. It's the web server.
More like the web server. So it understands web protocols and it understands. Yeah.
It understands HTTP basically.
Yeah.
Then you've got a regular firewall. I haven't played with these a whole lot, but I know that they can do a bit more than a web application firewall can. So it'll do some layer 7 stuff. So it does other protocols basically. Interconnects, which sort of fits in with the virtual network. You can connect between multiple, not between cloud. Well, you can do between clouds too, different ways, but like internal to AWS, you can connect between multiple different virtual networks. You can connect between accounts. You can connect between, your AWS network and your on-prem network. So there's a lot of different interconnects that you can do there. And then VPNs, which is it's VPN as a service essentially, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not. So you can basically create an IPsec VPN. But it limits. There's limitations to how much configuration you can do there. Sometimes it's better to just like spin up your own VPN, or spin up a router instance, and then just use that router to spin up whatever kind of VPN you want. But there's limitations. So if you use the specifically designed VPN service, like AWS is the one I know best, but if you use AWS's VPN instance, when you connect your networks, the routing between where you're connecting and AWS will automatically pick up the IP addresses. You can set up things like BGP to do as a routing protocol. You can do all sorts of advanced stuff. If you're spinning up your own instance inside of an EC2 instance, you're more limited on what you can do. Generally speaking, you can kind of only talk between whatever you're connected to and the local subnet that router's on. There's lots of tricks to get around that, but it's a little bit harder to get things up and running. But it can be more flexible if you need it to be. So there's tons and tons and tons of different types of network functionality you can do on these. And there's a whole bunch more that either I haven't touched or isn't worth getting into because there's like esoteric cases where you would use it. Satellites come as an instance. Satellite networking is a thing, and you can do that with some of the cloud providers.
Yeah, I remember when I was at reInvent back in 2018, they announced, hey, we have satellites now. And I'm like, satellite? Like space satellites? That's awesome. Scary, but awesome. And I just want to say, Jason, I'm impressed. Not because you knew all that stuff about networking, because I knew you knew all that stuff about networking, but your voice has not
Because my
gone south
microphone- Yeah.
the
okay.
entire time you went
You
through
were
that whole
not
thing.
betrayed. Your browser has not betrayed you.
I wish I knew what was causing it, what the trigger was, but
It
like,
seemed-
I wasn't doing anything.
Triggered.
It seemed like when you came off mute, like when you muted yourself for a long enough time and came back from mute, it was messed
Yes,
up.
just don't
So,
mute.
Yeah,
Don't mute.
I mean,
Hold your breath.
Well, I could do that. I could not mute, and then if I make the slightest noise or my
Then
air
I'll
conditioner
complain.
kicks in,
Yeah.
like then I catch hell from you guys anyway. So,
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
No, you won't catch hell from me.
You'll catch hell from me.
A-
Whose
and my
dogs are going crazy?
starting their-
I hear dogs.
they're starting their normal. Oh, it's 8 o'clock bullshit.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah.
all right. Anyway, I got two more sort of sections here. Hopefully they're not going to take too much longer. We've been at this, I guess, just about an hour, given that we started just a little bit late. So we're going to try to get through them quick. The next segment here is storage terminology, and there's a number of things we could probably go pretty deeply into, but I don't know if we have to. The first of which is block storage, and the best way I can simplify this is block storage is like a hard drive. It's like a thing you plug in that gives you raw blocks, right? Which is exactly what a USB stick would be, or a hard drive you've plugged in, or a physical disk, right? Blocks. You can lay down a file system on that, and you have a storage device connected to your machine. That's great for if you just need to store things. But as soon as you need access to that outside of that machine, it has all the same limitations that a hard drive would, in that it's not network accessible unless you run a service that makes it network accessible.
Through the instance that it's attached to,
Right.
let us be clear about it.
Right. So, like, I have a Linux machine with a block store connected to it. If I want to make that accessible to other machines, generally the way I would do that is like an NFS server running on my Linux box, which is not a great way to do this stuff in the cloud, because there's built-in technologies
You're
that will give you the
wasting-
same. Right. You're wasting money.
wasting resources.
Essentially is what you're doing. Further down in the list, I talk about a filer or file storage. That's pretty much exactly what you've built in the cloud instead of just utilizing what the cloud provider already gives you. You can get a filer service or a networked file system directly from the cloud provider that works just like NFS, right? So don't build your own NFS box in the cloud. Utilize the one that's there. It'll generally be cheaper. But I skipped ahead. The next on the list is object storage. Now, object storage is like, at a very high level, it's storage, just like the block store is. What it's not is directly attached to your instance, right? What object storage is... Hang on a second here, I have to...
Buckets.
There was a thing, yeah.
They're called. It's like a big bucket. It's
Right.
like when you tell your kids to pick up the family room, and every single friggin' toy just gets thrown into the chest.
Yeah,
That's an
object store.
Seriously, it's just
What-
all the shit dumped in a box, not indexed in any way,
Right.
and you can pull it back out of the box.
So the block storage also has the limitation that a physical hard drive would in storage, right? An object store or an object storage does not have that limitation, right? You can keep throwing stuff into that object store and they'll just keep giving you more space and happily charging you for that more space. So if you have like 3 gigabytes of stuff to store, you put in 3 gig, it costs you almost nothing, right? If you bought a 100 terabyte block store and put 3 gig on it, you're still paying for the 100 terabyte block store. Object storage, you pay for what you're using, right? But it's also accessible from other systems, right? So if I have a dozen systems in AWS, they all talk to the same object store, they can all read the same files from the same object store. And it's accessible over a web API, right?
That's pretty much the way to get to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much
Is
it. I
the
don't think there's
API
any other
calls.
way. Any way you talk to a block store, it's over this API call. So with that, sorry, did I say block store? I meant object store.
You did.
Is through an API, and that means that you can access it from anywhere. Granted, you have an access key set up for it, right? Now you need to be careful because you can also make object stores public, which is great if you want to like run a little simple static website, which is a really cheap way to run a static website on AWS. You put it inside of an object store, and then you make it public, and people can access the site, right? And there it is, right? It's like hosted. But as soon as it's dynamic, then that all falls apart. But if you're putting sensitive data in there, you do not want it public because people can just go in and take your data, which was the subject of a whole lot of breaches about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and it probably still happens today. It's just a lot more eyes on that. It used to be the default, if I remember. What?
You mispronounced nudes. You called it sensitive data.
That's valid. Yeah, don't put your nudes on a public block store, object store. Keep doing that. Block storage. Anyway, so yeah, object storage, it's a great, cheaper way to store stuff as long as you're careful with the access rights you have in, and your application can support it, right? So you can't just like take your little web application and say, instead of using a block store, I'm going to use an object store. It has to be written to talk to that API, right? Otherwise, it's not going to know how to get the data out. Then there's, on the subject of object storage, there's commonly tiered storage. There's hot storage. Yep, it makes you cry. There's hot storage and cold storage, right? So you've heard of S3 Glacier or Amazon Glacier. That's meant to be cold storage, like long-term storage. You put a bunch of data in there. They don't charge you much to store it, but they will like have you cut your arm off if you want to take the data back out again later. It's great for like backups that you don't need frequently, or if you have like a big archive you need to save, or whatever, like what's the word I'm looking for? Storage for like legal proceedings and whatever, where you need to keep the data for 7, 8, 10 years, but you probably aren't ever going to have to take it out of there. That's a great thing to use something like Glacier for, cold storage. Hot storage, on the other hand, is the stuff you're going to use all the time. That costs you more for the storage, but there's no penalty for accessing it, right? Where there would be with cold storage. So that's the trade-off there.
There's another trade-off. Hot storage is instant access. Cold storage
right.
can literally take hours to access.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically put in a request to get access to the cold storage, and then you wait until they say, yeah, it's ready. Right.
Which again would normally be fine as long as you're putting the right type of stuff in there. If it's truly archival data that you're not going to need at a moment's notice, you don't want to put last week's backup in there, because tomorrow your server could crash, and to get your backup back out might take hours, and it might cost you an arm and a leg, right? But backups from 3 years ago that you have to hold on to for legal reasons, fine. That's a great thing to put in there. All right. Let's see. We talked about Filer, disk image. This is what we were talking about earlier when Jason was talking about instances, and in a way, it's kind of also applicable to containers. But a disk image is basically you create like a golden image of the operating system that you're going to run on your cloud provider or your private cloud, and that's what your new instances are based from, right? So I've got a RHEL box that's my base image, and I like to put these particular accounts on it, or I like to have these particular services configured to run out of the box. I like to have this particular security policy applied. I build all that into my disk image, and I said that to the cloud provider, and then I say, when I build a new RHEL box, base it on this image, and then all that stuff comes along with it, right? So that's what I mean by a disk image. All right, the last section here is interfaces, and we've kind of touched on a lot of these already. There's an API, which is basically a programmatic way of interacting with your cloud provider, application programming interface. The term API is not cloud specific. This has been something that I've been learning about ever since I was like way back in college. Lots of applications use an API to talk internally to themselves or to other applications that are made to work with them. In this context, they're usually what we call web APIs, which are an API that's accessible via the web, right? Just like that object store we were talking about earlier. You can also talk to your cloud provider and have it provision things, build new networks, build new instances, build new whatever, Lambda things. So that's essentially the way a lot of developers will talk to a cloud provider so that they can make things automatic. Then there's the web-based console, which is essentially the same concept as the API, except it's for meaty fingers and eyeballs and brains to interact with instead of programs, right? So this is just what it sounds like. It's the thing you log into. Sorry, Cloud Management Portal is what I meant to say there. Web console is slightly different. Cloud Management Portal is like you log into and you say, I'm going to click these buttons to make a instance. I'm going to click these buttons to define some new DNS. I'm going to click these buttons to make a new load balancer, right? So that's basically to carry out the same tasks you might have with the Cloud API, but in a more manual fashion. Web-based console, what I meant to say for that was this is, I have an instance or something that has a console to it that normally I would go plug a keyboard and mouse into to see the output on that console. A web-based console is that, except it's given to you in a web browser because you can't go to your cloud provider's data center and plug in a keyboard and a mouse. So that's what that's all about. And then, of course, one of you added CLI tools. Yes, most cloud providers will have a CLI tool that you can run on Linux or Windows or Mac that will basically translate whatever command you're typing to an API call and send it to the cloud provider, right? So it's a human interactable way to talk to the APIs from a command line. You could, then script that data or script that instead of having to make direct API calls, that sort of thing. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that? Whoever typed it? Or did I cover that well enough?
That would have been Jason.
No, that was me. It's just it's the command line jockey likes the CLI stuff.
Yeah.
So that we can do it quicker.
Yeah, and in some cases, the command line tools are essentially your API, right? If you want to write a bash script that spins up new machines, that's your API, right? It runs commands with arguments and whatnot.
Yeah, and you'll see often that the command makeup on the tool, so like on AWS or Azure's tool, like if you want to spin up an EC2 instance, you'll have to call the EC2 API. So you'll tell it, AWS space EC2 space run this command.
Right.
And that command name happens to be the API command. It's building all the API stuff in the back end. You're just telling it which commands to use. So it's actually a really good tool if you want to learn the API by doing, so that you can sort of understand what's happening before you go write a big long program to do something.
Yeah, but the nice thing that also does is finding out the API endpoints. Sometimes means you're poring over documentation to find out what these endpoints are. Sometimes it's not obvious where you need to point these API calls at. And what I mean by an API endpoint is literally the web URL that you point your commands at, where you send your put to, right? If you're doing a direct API command. That's not always obvious. Like, for example, we talked a lot about object storage. When you create a bucket, it'll tell you right in the bucket, here's the API endpoint that you would use. And, so you make an access token. And that's another thing we didn't talk about, an access token. That's a programmatic way to give a program access to your cloud stuff. You can link it up to anything. I recently was doing this with a bucket, so that's fresh in my brain. But you basically make an API token, say it has access to this bucket. It's got read or write or both. And then, you have the API endpoint, the access token, and then you have to have software or write your own software that can take all that and actually pass it along, right? Whereas this CLI tools have all that functionality built in. You give it an access token, and it knows everything else it needs to know. And that's the end of the list. We got through a long list in record time. Record time for Iron Sysadmin Podcast, anyway. Any final thoughts on cloud stuff? And I hope to make this a little bit of a series. Like, it may not be the next episode we're talking about more cloud stuff, but I think over time we're going to touch on more and more cloud topics. And this was meant to be like an introductory to a start point to that.
So I guess the reality is that if you're a system administrator, if you're going to swim in that ocean today, there's a really good chance that you will have to you'll either want to, or you'll be forced to deal with these various types of technologies. At every company I've been at in recent years, it's always been a mix of our own hardware with our internal apps, sometimes running on other third-party apps, plus mostly software as a service. And then some of the stuff in the middle there starts filling in as well.
Right. So at the college, we went from 100% on-prem to sort of a blend of cloud and on-prem it might be 15 years ago, where the first software as a service stuff started coming in. And it was a very slow progression there, but a lot of places it's not so slow, right? Somebody spins up an EC2 instance and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and they say, I don't need to wait for IT anymore. So the way to get a handle on that is to have an official program that your IT folks control, right? So that if someone needs an EC2 instance or whatever, something provided by a cloud provider, they have a path to get through the IT people, through all the controls and checks that your IT people want to have on things like this. Not just because they're control freaks, but because there's security policy that has to be followed, right? If you just fold your arms and say, nope, no cloud, your users are going to use it anyway. Because it's too easy. It's just too easy. You plug in your credit card, you try to get it expensed later. If you don't get it expensed, whatever, it was 28 cents for the month, or, it's not that low, but you know what I mean. So, you should embrace it. Or you should have policies that say, no, you cannot because of these reasons that you can fall back on. Because then if employees or users do use cloud providers, you have a policy that says, no, you can't do that. And you can either be terminated or reprimanded for that. If you need to go that route. Because there are industries that still will not use cloud providers because the data they're working with is just that sensitive. That list is getting shorter and shorter as time goes on because cloud providers have legal protections that say, no, your data is totally safe here. Until it's not, I suppose, but... But anyway. All right, so folks that are listening, if you have any specific cloud topics you want us to try to cover, let us know. We'd love to hear some feedback. If you think we missed some pieces, let us know. We'd love to cover them in the future. If it's a place you'd like to see this conversation go, again, let us know. Reach out to us through Discord or on Twitter, or you can even email us if you really want to. Just go to ironsysadmin.com. You can find all the ways to contact us. Any final thoughts on cloud stuff, you guys? Cloudy McCloud stuff? Cloudy?
Not really.
Cloudykins. All right, folks. We're going to go to a break. This concludes part A of the show. We're going to go back to a split show. If you don't listen to part B, then, bully on you, whatever. We don't like you anymore. No, we do. Anyway, if you don't listen to the second half of the show, then just know that you can find us live on both YouTube and Twitch on the second and fourth Thursday of every month. You can check out ironsysadmin.com to find all the ways to contact us. You can join our Discord. And if you want to support the show, you can do so via Patreon. This is all important stuff that I need to tell you guys before we go to a break. And now, I think we're going to go to a break. So folks that are watching live, we will catch you in a few. Let me just find the button here. The push the button.
Push the button, Frank.
All right, folks, we'll see you in a few.
Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And thank you. Are you a fan?
We need like a cool transition animation so you guys don't just see us standing here waiting for the music to finish.
That's why I bopped my head. That's a cool transition animation.
Oh, that's valid, I guess. All right, folks, welcome back to the second part of the show. This is the part where we ramble on about all kinds of BS and we do some usual housekeeping stuff. And the start of that housekeeping is we want to thank all of our patrons. So thank you to all of the folks
to you.
I'm about to list right here. And as a reminder, we mentioned after, from July until December, our Patreon earnings are going to go to the American Cancer Society because of, well, I don't know anyone that has not had a negative impact in their life from cancer in one way or another. So, but most recently, of course, because of my mother-in-law passing away. So, again, I'm going to give you the disclaimer. If for some reason you do not want your money to go to the American Cancer Society, just let me know, and I will withhold whatever amount you would have been giving. But so far, no one's reached out to me with that, so I assume that's not going to be a problem for folks. Anyway, so thank you to Name Pending 197, Jeremy, Aranami, Andrew, Tatro, Bruce, Robert, David, Solemn, Linux Sys 666, Mark with a K, The Mentor, Mark with a C, Julius, Andy, Jay, and Charles. Thank you to each and every one of you. We're bringing in 90-something a month, and then, of course, Patreon takes their cut out, so it turns out to be more like 70 or 80 or something. It's really not. It's not minimal. So, but yeah. I guess they have their own fees and whatnot that they have to pay for, so I can't complain too much. They give us a platform, and they got to take their cut, I guess. It's almost like paying taxes, except optional. We could not use Patreon and not have to pay it, unlike taxes. I guess you could refuse to pay taxes. Eventually they come knocking on the door, though, I think. Anyway, I'm rambling already. Right, if you'd like to support Iron Sysadmin, you can do so, like I said, at Patreon, or you can go buy a t-shirt at Teespring, teespring.com/stores/Iron Sysadmin. And that's kind of it for the announcements. Did you have any announcements, either of you? I don't think we have any other announcements.
Not anything official like.
We're starting planning for the DEF CON 610 pub crawl as we've had last year. So that once we have a date set, I'll be sure to mention that. Anybody that's in the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton region of Pennsylvania, you can come on out to the pub crawl. It's been lots of fun. Mark ate a fish with a head on it last year.
I did not eat the fish's actual head.
No, but it had a head.
The problem with that dish is I had eaten so much prior to that by the time that hit the table,
Yeah.
I was kind of full, and you know that feeling when you're kind of full, but you
really want to eat it anyway.
To eat this delicious dish because it was clear the guy put so much love into it, and it smelled great. And it's like,
Yeah.
basically, I ate too much.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
a near thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, when we got to that particular restaurant, I was full enough that I
Would
didn't
do
order
again.
anything. Oh yeah, right. It did look really good.
Would do again.
Totally. All right. So yeah, when we have info on that, I will be sure to share it.
Yeah.
All right. So
I'm October. I'm out of pocket from the 11th to the 26th. So I don't know. I don't remember if the pub crawls before Halloween
we
or not.
usually try to do it close to Halloween.
Yeah.
But last year that backfired on us because of the PumpCon security conference that happens down, I think it's in Philly. They weren't going to have a conference, and then last minute decided they were going to have a conference, and it was the same day as the PubCon, or pub crawl. So no one showed up to the pub crawl.
Fun. It was fun, but the light attendance was super disappointing.
It was.
Put a lot of work into it.
The first year we did it was awesome. We probably had 20 or 30 people show up, and people had a great time. We actually had some good competition. Some folks from outside of the normal group came up and had a good time. It was great, and we were really hoping for a similar thing last year, and it just didn't pan out that way, and it was really disappointing. But anyway, so yeah, when it comes around, I will keep in mind your availability, Mark, because I know you want to make it there. There's probably going to be a poll in the DEF CON 610 Discord once we have some dates picked
in that
and
instance.
in that instance of Discord. Discord! Yeah, so that's a thing. If you're in the area, go join that Discord. Let me know if you need an invite. We can get you in there. And you can vote on it as well if you want to. Anyway, yeah, so I had an announcement the last time we recorded, but then we had to cut it short because of my sink exploding. But I started a new job. I'm now, instead of a technical account manager at Red Hat, I'm a technical marketing manager at Red Hat, which deserves a disclaimer. Because the word marketing has a really negative connotation to it. As a TAM, I had to know a lot of our products really well to help our customers use it. As a TMM, technical marketing manager, I have to know a slightly smaller subset of those products really well so I can share it with everybody that will listen. So I'm still very much a technical person, still very much dealing with things like product demos and labs and technical articles and blogs and whatever. But the really cool thing for me is I really like content creation. It's why I run the podcast. It's why I do other things that are content creation related. It's why I write blogs and stuff. And a TMM does a lot of those things for Red Hat. So now I am officially a professional content creator, if you want to look at it slightly skewed, right? So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I started actually the beginning of this week, so I've only been a TMM for 4 days. But as of the last show, it was all pretty much set in stone, and the customers that I was serving at the time already knew, so I was ready to tell everybody about it. But whatever, it got delayed by 2 weeks. Announcing it got delayed by 2 weeks. The job still happened at the same time.
How have the first 4 days been?
It's been good. It's been good. 3 days, technically, because Monday was a holiday. So my first day as a TMM was a day off. But
that's perfect.
That's a great way to start.
I know, right? But yeah, it's so far it's good. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of like salesy, markety things that I need to be involved in now, and that's a world I've never even touched. So all of that is brand new to me, and I'm lost there. I'm hoping that that's going to be okay, and that I'm going to learn what I need to know and not have to get too deep into it.
You've done this to yourself.
I have done it to myself, but I'm still excited about it. I still think it's going to be I still think it's going to be a good opportunity. It's going to be a lot of fun, and good stuff. However, it does mean that I'm now another step removed from the content of this show, and that concerns me a little. So we're going to be very careful to not skew Iron Sysadmin toward a Red Hat sales pitch show. That's always been on my mind ever since I started at Red Hat, because obviously 2 of us are Red Hatters, and a lot of what we say and what we think is influenced by that, whether we know it or not or like it or not. Yeah, if it becomes difficult to make objective content for this show, then we're definitely going to address that. And if anybody starts noticing that, let us know. Other than that, have you, Mark? I think you've looked at this game. Have either of you tried the game The Last Campfire?
I know of it, but I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, ditto. I've heard of it. I think I saw a trailer, but I haven't touched it yet.
It's produced by the same company that releases No Man's Sky, which is really the only reason I even heard about it. It's made by Hello Games, and No Man's Sky is a really fun game. So it came up as recommended. I think it was on sale, or maybe it's just a cheap game. I don't remember, but it's a fun little like. I have 20 minutes to waste. I feel like sitting down and playing a chill game. That's the kind of game it is. It's like a little puzzle game. It's cool. I enjoy it. It works with my Stadia controllers. And sometimes that's a selling point for me.
You and your Stadia controllers.
Look, they're awesome controllers. I'm telling you. I've said this before. This is like the selling point of Stadia. This is because the service is not. It never really turned into what they wanted it to be, and I knew that was a possibility. But the only real saving grace is that these controllers are really awesome. And as long as you can get them to work with whatever game you're playing, they're really nice. They're nice controllers.
So, Last Campfire,
Yeah.
The ratings on it look fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great little game, and it it has the feel of an indie game. I don't know if it's developed by a smaller studio and just released by Hello Games. It has a completely different feel to it than No Man's Sky does. Like you know how a lot of games that come out of the same studio have a similar feel.
On Steam, the developer and the publisher are the same.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's their work, but yeah, you wouldn't know.
Very
You wouldn't
fun
know.
on Steam Deck too.
Yeah, but it's good. It's a good little game. I'm having fun with it.
That's nice.
It would probably be fun on Steam Deck if you're saying it works on Steam Deck.
It's rated as playable on Steam Deck.
I apparently own it on Switch. I just haven't gotten there yet because I'm too busy playing RPGs that take up all my time.
Oh, well, it's fun. You should try it.
I should. But I'm playing Nino Kuni right now, which is just like really in depth, and much more difficult than you would expect.
I've never even heard of that, so I don't know.
I kept hearing about it as like from a couple game podcasts I listened to, and I was like, fine, I'll check it out. And I looked at it, I'm like, this looks like a kid's game, and I played it for about 5 minutes and went, yeah, little kids are not playing this because this is really hard.
Way too in depth.
So it's like a it's not that it's super in. I guess it gets pretty in depth, but it's just the battling system is it's a little weird and it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around. It gets a little easier the more you know about it, but still it's not simple.
Cool.
It's got a very Zelda feel to it right up until you battle with somebody. Then it's more like a think Final Fantasy but more real time.
Well, throw the name of it or a link or something in the notes. I'll be sure to include it because I
can do that.
Nino something. I've already forgotten the name.
Oh damn!
It's called Ni no Kuni.
Nino
I
Kuni.
have no idea what that means though.
Okay. Cool. Well, you want to finish up your chat and then we'll talk about whatever Mark had in here?
Yeah, I mean, the only other
or is
thing
that
I'm
it?
really doing is like no, I'm playing disturbing amounts of Final Fantasy 14. I blame my wife.
Is that the MMO?
Yeah.
I don't think I've tried 14.
I've heard that if you like MMOs, it's good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an amazing MMO. It's really really good, super in depth, and there's a lot of callbacks to a lot of different things all over the place.
Wasn't
just embedded everywhere.
So
it's just so much fun.
Wasn't 12 an MMO?
11.
11 was an MMO, and then
Yeah.
so is that still around, or did they close that down and make 14?
Don't know. I don't know. I know
Okay.
that I think so. The final DLC for 14 has already been out for a while, and I think like it's nearing the end of sort of their arc. So of course I get into it now. I don't know if that means that there's a new one coming or it's just the end of whatever this arc is, and maybe there'll be more. I'm not sure, but the game has unbelievable levels of depth. You can't get bored. There's so much to do.
If you start it with a level 1 character, do you get to play the entire arc?
Yes.
All the arcs that have been. Yeah, that's
Yes.
a good way to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the better MMOs are like that. Like in theory, you can, if you start WoW from level 1, you can basically do all the quests, the stories that were in the game from launch.
Yeah, but they nuked a bunch of them and made them simpler.
Can you?
After Cataclysm.
So
Cataclysm changed some things permanently, but it's funny because there's some shit that's in there that doesn't acknowledge the Cataclysm happened.
Yeah.
Especially in the expansions.
I thought so. I played all of. Well, I played. I actually didn't finish the first, like the original WoW, because my computer blew up. But
and you can play classic if you want the pre-Cataclysm stuff.
Yeah.
I came back to play, and this was years later when Cataclysm was already out, and I got in and I was like, okay.
Why is
I'm
it
not
all
even
different?
in Cataclysm yet, and the ground is all ripped up, and there's rivers of lava, and I'm like, this is like interesting, but now the stuff that I was doing doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah, that there
with-
are areas where it's absolutely disconcerting. So if you want the true quest lines from Azeroth
yeah,
prior to Cataclysm, you know classics included with your
yep,
subscription, you can replay those
yeah,
quests.
yeah. I with Final Fantasy 14. So there's a lot of instances, like I know at least for quest lines, you'll see people standing in areas just weirdly standing there. Well, apparently a quest line may have ended there, and they're seeing something that's different from what you're seeing. So there's like
So they
there's
use
pieces like
phasing.
that. Yeah, and I don't know that there's much in the way of terrain changes per se. I haven't really seen that. Tons and tons of dungeons and instances, and they do a lot of different stuff with like the combat is pretty in depth with how it works, and you can literally be every single class on the same character. So
Hmm.
like you can level up your characters, and then you can decide to become a different class, and they have a way of just switching, but you can't do it in battle obviously, but like you can just switch between classes. So you may have like a level 50 warrior, and you hit a button, and now you're a level 5 arcanist or something. So you appear to be being invaded there, Nate.
Oh, she left her phone in here. She's going to get it. Go on.
Sorry.
And that made
It
it
was going
worse.
so well.
All
So
right.
yeah, lots of Final Fantasy 14 with the wife, which is just a lot of fun.
You know what?
But
It's
you're gaming with your wife, so that
Yeah.
really I think that's the message.
yeah. We
Yeah.
I with my wife we played WoW together for a while. We played Guild Wars together for a while. Guild Wars 2 actually. And it's fun. Even if you don't necessarily love the game, it's nice to be able to do something like that with your wife. So
Yeah, Guild Wars was the original that we played.
yeah, and then she hated Guild Wars 2, so we never got to play together
She
on that.
Yeah, she was not a fan of Guild Wars 2. Matter of fact, she goes back to Guild Wars every once in a while.
Yeah.
But she was playing Arcage, and then Arcage got bought by a new company, and we're pretty sure because you can watch the numbers on Steam drop. We were pretty sure that the new company bought the game with the sole intention of bombing the game. Every single person that she knew who played the game left. The servers were like completely empty.
Sometimes they do that. It seems.
They absolutely destroyed the game.
Man,
Then we moved over to.
Speaking of older MMOs, the one I was so disappointed with was Dungeons and Dragons Online. I had such high hopes for that, and it was just like such a disappointment.
Warhammer Online.
I have
Yeah.
friends who keep trying to invite. They've invited us like a million times to play that, and we just never really get into it.
Yeah.
2 MMOs broke my heart. Warhammer Online and Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies, the original version, was so good because it was a true sandbox.
Yeah.
And then they switched
just,
to
like,
a system
destroyed
and
it.
They tried to turn it into World of Warcraft. You
And
can't
that was-
WoW.
That was made by the company that made EverQuest, wasn't it? I remember Star Wars
Correct.
Galaxies. I really wanted to like that
Sony.
too, and I never really got into it. And then I heard it
Had
just
they
got
gotten-
destroyed.
Yeah, its launch was really bad. They had a lot of quality issues, but they were working hard on the bugs and stuff like that. Had they gotten through that and kept all the systems and not tried to out WoW, it was so good.
The other one was Star Trek Online.
Star
That-
Trek Online still exists. and
Yeah,
it's
but
free to play today.
I was watching that when it was still in
That was a train
development,
wreck at
and
launch.
it looked awesome. And then it changed hands like 3 times. Like 2 development studios died.
Never a good sign.
and the game that came out didn't really hold up to the promises that the first game studio made. Because why would it, right? It changed hands,
No.
and they
I
took
played
it
at
new
launch,
visions
I'll
or
admit
whatever.
it. I bought it.
So did I. I could probably still log into it and play it. I bought the game. I just have to re-up my subscription. But it was the Star Trek world is just to me. That's the space game or the space whatever franchise that I like most. Star Wars is great. Don't get me wrong, but Star Trek is my thing. So I was really looking forward to that game, and then it just
Yeah.
it didn't
The
deliver.
It was it was so combat oriented
Yeah.
that it and they an MMO, you generally don't have a choice but to make it combat oriented because that's the easiest kind of content.
Yeah.
But it was so combat oriented that it broke the Star Trek illusion.
Yeah.
Also, and believe it or not, I was thinking about the stupid game when I was making breakfast today. Because I remember like being really almost horrified that when you made your character, you customized their uniform. Like,
yeah.
not everybody in Starfleet had the same uniforms. Like,
yeah.
And basically, so all the NPCs on your ship would have like versions of your uniform.
Yep.
And it was like from all the different eras and all the different variations of
Yep.
all the different Star Trek media.
Yep.
It was bizarre. And I don't know if they ever tried to justify it in universe, like in game, that why does every single starship have their own version of the Starfleet uniform?
I just wanted to play Stargate Worlds. Unfortunately, it never.
That never showed up. That would have been a good one too.
For the time, it looked really awesome.
Yeah.
But it it died on the vine.
Yeah, that would have been a good one. But yeah, to me, No Man's Sky is the game that Star Trek Online should have been.
in a lot of ways, you're right, because you don't have to just fight stuff.
Yeah.
It's not perfect by any means, my God.
No, that's not.
But it's certainly, it's unique.
Yeah. All right, so Mark, what did you have going on this week? I hear it was a pretty boring week for you.
So I had game night, not this week, but the week before, and it turns out that one of my fellow gamers brought the gift of COVID, which I found out. I started feeling like garbage on Thursday, a week ago today, right?
Yeah.
And I tested positive on Saturday morning. Now, were this 5 years ago, I would have been like, oh, yeah, I caught some flu, picked up some flu or a cold or whatever. Because that's honestly, it never felt worse than that. But, now it's 2022 and everything is COVID. And so I've been being a good little COVID victim and stuck in my house.
Yep. I had it.
Saturday.
I had it for the first time, might be a month ago now, almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago. And ironically, it was right after game night at your place. So, but no one else got sick. So,
yeah, I guess the lesson is don't do game night at Mark's.
Yeah, don't go to Mark's place unless you want COVID. No, I think I picked it up the weekend before, to be honest, because I started feeling crappy on like Wednesday. And they say 2 to 3 days is like the gestation period. So it could have been at your place, but I really think it was either I had been to church that Sunday, and I really think that's where I picked it up. We also did grocery shopping the day before, so that could have been it. I don't know. I don't know.
You'll never know.
Yeah.
You'll never know.
Right? But, the nerd in me wants to try to trace it back to where I picked it up. But you're right. You're never going to know. You're never going to know.
I got OG COVID in 2020, and my wife is like, you got it at the airport. And she might be right.
Were you licking doorknobs at the airport?
No, I had the nerve to walk through Orlando, and apparently a TSA employee in Orlando had COVID. That's when that shit was newsworthy, because it was when stuff was first happening.
Right.
I also could have caught it at Newark Airport. Yeah. I also could have caught it at Giant the next day after we got home, because I took my kids and their friend who emergency evac'd from Seton Hall to here because she actually lived in Arizona or New Mexico.
Yeah.
Whichever one Walter White lives in.
Man.
So she was staying with us until she could get a flight home. So I took them to Giant to like buy stuff. And for all I know, some Trump loving idiot breathed on me in Giant. I got it. I don't know. Oh God, I went there. I'm sorry. So, but my point is, it's impossible to know.
Yeah.
That's what masks are for.
That was back early in the pandemic when people were buying up all the toilet paper.
Yeah.
And if you remember, the people were told don't buy masks.
Yeah. Remember at the beginning, it was don't bother with a mask or whatever. Yeah.
And they were told that because they figured the same idiots that bought all the toilet paper would buy all the masks, and the people who needed them wouldn't be able to get
them. They weren't wrong.
Yeah, right. No, they weren't wrong.
But, 2.5 years later, some people are like, they said at the beginning we didn't need masks and whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not what I want to talk about. the point is, I hopefully I test negative tomorrow because I got some scout stuff going on this weekend. But the real, I think, headliner is that my wife and daughter and I are going to Disney in October, so I should be nice and super immune.
Until the next
COVID.
Until the next variant comes
Well-
out right before Disney, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they don't take COVID real seriously in Florida anyway. So
Yeah,
it's
I mean-
best that my immune system will know how to deal with it.
I don't want to sound like I'm not a medical professional, but every variant is getting less deadly and more transmissible, which is exactly what they
Right.
predicted at the beginning, right?
Well,
And eventually, we're just going to have to accept that people are going to get COVID and move on, right? I don't know when that breakover line is, but I think we're getting there. You know?
well, I read a very fascinating thing the other day. When did that flu epidemic from 1919 end?
It didn't.
There, right?
Yeah.
That was a trick question.
Yeah.
It's still going on.
Yeah.
What happened is that flu just became, just like you said, it kills less people and
Yeah.
it's more transmittable. So
Right.
that pandemic it became endemic.
Right. So, and believe me, I get it. My experience with COVID from a couple weeks ago is not going to be the same for everyone else who gets it today. But for me, it was no worse than any flu I've ever had. In fact, I've had worse flus. I've had flus where I thought I might die. And
I had pneumonia,
yeah,
which came close to killing me when I was in my 20s.
yeah,
The OG COVID, that was the second worst I've ever felt in my entire life. OG COVID in early 2020.
yeah,
And this COVID was like flu COVID, like
Yeah.
whatever.
yeah.
I'm fine.
I'm glad I never got it the first round. You know, and I've said this before on the show that I feel like I probably would have fared well, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out.
But the real take-home message is that I had a lot of time to watch some streaming stuff over Labor Day weekend, and my GTA Online character is now much wealthier. He
Yeah,
owns a decommissioned Russian sub, some other stuff. Yeah, Mark the other Mark and I
Yeah.
from Red Hat are playing together too. So
yeah,
GTA Online is my version of an MMO that I'm goofing with nowadays. And then I found this neat game on the Steam Deck. I mean, it doesn't have to run on the Steam Deck. It's on all the consoles, including the Switch, and it's actually the Steam version, but it's called Arcade Paradise. And it's really good on the Steam Deck. It takes place in a weird ass, like it's late 80s, early 90s kind of mashed together, and you play a college dropout whose father has put her in charge of the family laundromat as sort of like to try and teach her responsibility,
yeah.
and she ends up like becoming an entrepreneur and installing arcade cabinets and basically turn it into a killer arcade.
Nice.
So it's a business sim, but all the games that you have in your arcade are fully playable.
That's awesome.
And they're like riffs and basically rewrites of classic arcade games. Like there's a Missile Command, Communists from Mars. There's
Communists from Mars.
they've got space, and they've got their Pac-Man variant's one of my favorites. It's basically a mashup between Pac-Man and Grand Theft Auto, where your thief is driving a car, you're rolling around sucking up money, and the cop car hits you. And what happens is when the cops hit you in your car gets blown up, and you then start running as a character, and you've got a boombox, and you can throw musical notes at the cops to stun them, and it points to where a replacement car is, and if you can get to your replacement car, you can keep going. It's a trip.
That's
But
funny.
if you like arcade games, if you like the Ready Player One nostalgia stuff, it's a really well done game. Your
Oh,
father, by the way, is voiced by Geralt from The Witcher 3. The same voice actor who does Geralt in The Witcher 3 is your father, Gerald, who is visiting the Riviera. They intentionally set that up.
That's funny.
It's really, really well done.
that's funny.
It's like
That's
$20 on Steam.
That's the
Or,
other thing
again,
I'm doing. I forgot to mention. I went through and I redid all of the Dresden Files audiobooks that I had because I felt like it.
That
And
has
I
nothing to do with anything I just said.
well, hold on. I just finished the last one,
Okay.
but there is a new, I think it's a short story called The Law that's written by the same author, but I don't have any credits on Audible. I was waiting for them to renew. So I was looking for something else to listen to while I was waiting for my next credit, and I'm listening to Ready Player One again. And it's just as much fun the fourth time through as it was the first, second, and third time. I love that story.
Yeah, it's a fun read.
Yeah.
So that's I feel like I feel like every time we do news updates, it's about what video games I'm playing.
Well,
Like I had that awesome canoe trip with the Venture Crew in August. I forget whether I had a chance to talk about that because we didn't really have. We had a period where we didn't have shows.
yeah, we didn't. We missed August,
the
I
crew
think.
and I did like 66 miles.
Actually, no, we
over
picked it
6
up in
days and
August, so
5
you might have
nights.
talked about it. I don't remember.
Yeah. So I don't just play video games all the time. My son's back at Stevens. We're visiting him this Sunday, and prior to that, my crew is helping out at a rodeo. We've never done that before. That should be fun.
Like a real rodeo? That's cool.
Yeehaw! Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bull riders. We're not doing any of that. My crew's going to be the color guard, and
You're all rodeo
I
clowns.
don't-
That's how you're helping out, right? You're gonna
I
get
am a
impaled
clown,
by a
but
bull.
not that. I hope not. But yeah, but as far as the nerds here are concerned, I can't recommend Arcade Paradise enough. And I think what'll eventually happen to it is even after once you beat the story, you then have this awesome arcade
Just go
that
play.
you can play the games.
To go
in.
play parody games in.
And well, some of them are really good. Like
That's
there's
awesome.
this 2-stick zombie attack game. It's like the games are all across the different styles. There's some vector graphics ones. There's some of the old school Donkey Kong style graphics, and then there's like they've got like the fighting games with the really good graphics and stuff. They even have a whack-a-mole game.
That's cool.
And a foosball game.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, check it out.
There's
a demo.
like sometimes I like that style again, like the business management game, right? Sometimes I like that style, sometimes I don't. It depends how it's done. But the video game piece might make it worth it.
Well, let me put it this way: you cannot fail the business aspect of it, and at the very beginning, you make most of your money doing laundry, which sounds awful, but even that's kind of fun because everything
I'm playing
you
a video
make
game about doing laundry
and picking up garbage from the laundromat, but everything like has like video game scoring and things like around it. Like, oh, I did an S load because I got the wet clothes in the dryer fast enough and then got the dry clothes on the dryer fast enough. So it's an S rank as opposed to I let the clothes sit in the washer too long and then not out.
And they got mildewy
yeah, so it's a C level. It does the whole CBAS, and then
That's cool.
You get your payment is based on how well you did.
That's funny. I'll have to check it out. Arcade Paradise, huh? On Steam, obviously.
Arcade Paradise. If you're gonna get it on Windows, yeah. Or again, it's on all the consoles too.
Yeah.
Xbox, PlayStation.
I wonder if
Switch.
it'll work with my Stadia controller.
It works great on the Steam Deck, so yes, it should work with your Stadia controller on Windows.
The Stadia controller has the limitation that it doesn't show up as a standard video game controller, so there's like this funny little shim driver you have to run. That's why
Dude,
I say that.
I can't help you there.
I know. Anyway, some games support it natively, others don't. That's why I'm saying.
Living in Arcade Paradise. Of course, I always think Gangster Paradise when I go to fire up Arcade Paradise. It's like Coolio in my head.
All right, should we move along into the news?
Power in the money.
I think-
Money in the power.
I think that's a yes.
Ooh, COVID dizzy.
You looked like you were moving your head pretty fast, so much that the video
I
couldn't keep
was.
up. You were just a blur.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Hopefully,
our news tonight. The first article Jason, I think you're going to love this because I remember having conversations with you about how much you hated this feature when it started getting so prevalent. And that is that the Facebook button, and this is from CNBC, by the way, the Facebook button is disappearing from websites as consumers demand better privacy. And the gist of the article is Dell, everybody's favorite computer manufacturer, maybe not everybody's, some people's favorite computer manufacturer. You used to be able to, when you logged into Dell's website to buy a computer or whatever, you could log in using your Facebook login, right? That little OAuth thing that would let you connect your ID from Facebook to whatever site you're logging into. Dell apparently received complaints from customers, I guess. They're removing it from the site, or have removed it from the site at this point. So I don't know what that means for folks that were using that to log in, if they got some other sort of a stub account that they can still log in and manage their account with. But they're basically backing out of that because they don't like the privacy concerns that linking up with Facebook brings along with it. It does make me wonder what this might mean for other sites, because I don't leverage Facebook login because I don't like the privacy implications. But I do leverage Google login pretty frequently, especially from my days when I was an all-in Android user, right? There's a lot of accounts where I'm using Google login, and it has really the same kind of problem, right? There's a lot of data about you in Google, depending how they handle it. Like, it could be the same sort of privacy concern. So I do wonder if I'm going to be in this boat where I have to make new accounts on all these sites if they start removing Google logins. But yeah, so apparently they're not the only site doing it either. There's other sites that have been following suit. Looks like they're listing sites like Best Buy, Ford Motor. I guess that's like Ford, the place you buy cars from. Pottery Barn. I don't know if that's going to affect me. Nike, Patagonia. Match?
Pottery Barn. Oh no.
Is that like Match.com, the dating site?
Yeah, Match.com and Twitch. I mean, that's the one that jumps out at me on the list. The other ones are like, meh, whatever.
Yeah.
But Twitch has gotten rid of it, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, right? I mean, Twitch is the sort of site you'd expect to have social login because of exactly what it is, right? But, that's kind of crazy. So, yeah, there's... They do mention the Google thing here. I'm going to have to reread the article and see if I can find more information about whether people are also doing this with Google accounts. Because that'll actually affect me. The Facebook thing, I don't think I've used Facebook login on anything. Maybe one or two things that only offered it.
I do it occasionally just because I'm super lazy.
Yeah, for me it was before I was using a password manager. It was a lot more, I felt like it was more secure to have a single authenticated login than it was to have passwords all over the place. But now that I have a password manager and I just generate those passwords anyway, it's probably more secure that way because, if someone were to break into one account, they don't get access to everything. But you know what I mean. Anyway, I guess it's a trade-off. So, if you're using Facebook login on sites like Dell, Best Buy, Ford, Pottery Barn, and the Pottery Barn thing. That's going to hurt.
If you're using Facebook login, please stop.
Yeah, stop.
I'll try, Jason.
Yeah, the conversation I'm referring to, Jason, was when there was like a contest or something you wanted to join, and the only way to join was with a Facebook login, and you're like, nope, can't do it.
Yep. Yeah, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I can make my statement even more concise. If you're using Facebook, just stop.
Just stop.
My recommendation. Just get rid of it.
Yeah. They are.
One of these days I will.
Well, I mean, you may not have a choice eventually. It sounds like they're kind of in trouble over all of their chasing the metaverse crap. Just because Zuckerberg is so hyper-focused on it that he's spending a bunch of money on it, and they're not making enough money to cover his obsession. Or at least that's what they're speculating. So...
I'm on Facebook to swap memes with other friends now.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah,
much the case.
I don't use it as much as... In fact, there was a point where I almost wasn't logging into it at all. I didn't even have it on my phone anymore.
You got into a little tuss with someone the other day, I saw. You got a little spicy the other day.
Oh, you mean... Yeah, I guess maybe we won't go into that one on the show, because it was political, but... Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. All right, my next article, you're gonna love this one, Mark.
Mary Kay for pros.
So it's from the Washington Post. Basically, they say Treasury will warn. I think they mean the U.S. Treasury or Treasury Department. Will warn White House that crypto needs major regulations, and I think we knew this was coming eventually, right?
I'm sorry, I can't read the article because
Pretty-
I've read my maximum. free
Oh
articles.
yeah, that's the problem with the
No,
Washington Post.
Copy the link, open up a incognito window, and paste it in. Anyway,
Is that too much work to get to the
it's-
Washington Post?
it's
No, I have Brave.
it's nothing new. There have been warnings about. I don't know if Treasury has sent an official thing, but this has been warned about for years.
Well,
now.
the article suggests that they have insider information that says they are about to do this. Like they're about
Yeah,
to start suggesting the imposition of regulation on Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency.
And I put a follow up article, well, sort of a follow up tweet about one that has apparently just broke, that the White House says that Congress may consider legislation to ban proof of work Bitcoin mining,
Wow.
which is kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean that's what Bitcoin is based on. So if proof of work goes away, there's other mechanisms now, but that's
So,
the big one.
My question there would be: is that motivated by wanting to kill Bitcoin, or wanting to kill cryptocurrency, or is that motivated by the environmental impact? Because there's been lots of people warning that the environmental
according
impact of mining
to-
Bitcoin is nowhere
yeah.
near acceptable.
According to the quote that they have here, it's specifically to minimize GHG emissions, environmental justice impacts, and other local impacts from crypto assets. So it's a climate and energy thing.
That's what I thought. Okay, because I mean, folks that are
Makes perfect sense.
people that are mining Bitcoin are spending a ton of energy doing so, and of course that energy has to come from somewhere, and that energy has byproducts, and those byproducts are contributing to lots of nasty things. Right?
So that image I pasted says it all.
Image you pasted. I don't even know where you pasted it.
Image I pasted.
It's after the tweet.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the link to an image.
Oh, it's in the links. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen other.
Yeah.
So there was a. Yeah, that's it exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
if
we
you
talked
keep
about this on the
recording
show, I think 2 weeks
24/7,
ago. Yeah.
Produced, solved Sudokus, you could trade for heroin. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's I don't remember where, but there was a Bitcoin mining operation they stood up next to, like, at an old factory or something, where there was a power generation plant next to a lake.
Yeah.
And spinning that up, it was pulling so much energy that it actually raised the lake temperature. Like, the lake temperature started going up because of the amount of Bitcoin mining going on.
I'm not surprised.
The energy plant used the lake water to cool the turbines or whatever it was doing.
Yeah, and that's like that's what people say. Oh yeah, if you water cool it, or if you build it in Antarctica where it's always cold anyway, right? But what's the
You
impact of
still
that?
need the energy.
Right. You get enough of those doing that.
You still need to
Um,
generate the energy.
Yeah. Right. So the energy generation and the impact, right? If I'm running a hairdryer out in the Arctic, right, no one cares. If I'm running a billion hairdryers, the Arctic starts to get warmer. Right?
But the point is, even if the machines weren't throwing off the heat, they would still require a huge amount of energy.
Yeah.
It's not doing anything productive.
Right.
Which has
Right.
to be generated somehow.
Right.
Which typically involves burning fossil fuels.
Right. There's like this huge follow-on, right? There's like every level of cryptocurrency is turning out to be a bad idea.
It's terrible.
And it's all because people think they can get rich doing it, right? It's like,
And that's why it's a scam, because crypto and NFTs are all about the people who got in first.
right.
Which is just like another popular scam that I like to make fun of.
Yeah.
Your multi-level marketing nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we are where we are, and it's unfortunate that the government has to get involved because people can't be reasonable. But this is where laws seem to come from frequently. People can't be reasonable, so we have to make legislature that forces them to be reasonable. Then they complain that their freedoms are being infringed upon. And it's like
Well,
I can't.
some freedom should be.
Well, I usually lean toward freedom, right? And the fact that reasonable people can't have the freedom to do things that unreasonable people have caused to be illegal bothers me. But the unreasonable people are really the problem. It's not the law that's the problem. It's not the government that's the problem. It's the people that couldn't see reason.
I was born in 66. My dad owned a boat for a very long time. And I remember being on the Barnegat Bay in the 70s before all the EPA regulations really hit and the water was gray.
Yeah.
The Atlantic Ocean off of the coast of Jersey was brown. And I watched during my childhood and my young adulthood as these regulations that were put in place restricting the freedom to like dump oil and take a shit into the water took place. People being told what they can't do.
Yep.
And magically the water changed color. I went swimming in the Atlantic Ocean with the Scouts off the Jersey Shore this summer, and the water was a beautiful tropical blue.
Right. But see, that's exactly my point.
From telling people by restricting the freedom to be a destructive prick. And that's sometimes what you got to do.
I can't, I mean, maybe there are people that thought dumping oil and waste into the ocean was completely fine. But I got to imagine that most of those people knew it was wrong. They knew it was wrong, but they did it anyway, and that makes them idiots. Right?
Because it was profitable. And there are people today who would do it in an instant if this could make them more money.
But this is what frustrates me, right? They knew it was wrong, they did it anyway, they ruined it for everybody else. And this is the story of so many things in this country that have been taken away, freedoms that have been taken away, right? But I don't have a good answer to how else to do it other than brainwashing these idiots into not being idiots, right? The only way to do it is to make it illegal, and that takes stuff away from people who would have been reasonable, right? Anyway, it's
the tragedy of the commons is an old story.
Yeah. That's
not a modern story.
Oh no, I'm sure it's not. It's absolutely not. It's just frustrating is what it comes down to, and there's so many things that like hobbies that I enjoy in life that I won't go into because it'll just be like a rabbit hole we can go down that are in danger of being taken away. Because there's a lot of reasonable people who enjoy these hobbies and have a lot of great times with it and don't hurt anybody else, but there's enough that do hurt others and enough that abuse it, and because of that, we have to fight every day to keep our hobbies, and it's really frustrating.
Yep.
That's all I'll say about it, though. We're going to move on. We have another Facebook article from the Wall Street Journal, which probably also has a paywall. Do they have a paywall? You're going to have to use a private browser on this one, too?
Ghost Rider.
All right, so the Wall Street Journal, and really this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. I forgot I put an article in here about it. Facebook parent Meta Platforms cuts, it's the same company, cuts a responsible innovation team. So the responsible innovation team, apparently at Facebook/Meta, existed solely so that they had a review board internally that would take any new product ideas that came out of Facebook/Meta. And I say that because it was Facebook when it was formed, of course. Now it's Meta. They came out of Meta, and they would review it and say, is this responsible for the users, right? Like, is this going to be a privacy problem? Is it going to be a legal problem? Is it going to be this, that, or the other thing? And they're basically saying, well, first of all, I'm surprised that one existed in the first place, because we've seen some of the atrocities that came out of Facebook and Meta. Like the privacy atrocities, right? So what were these people doing in the first place? And maybe that's why they're cut now. But the team has now been cut. So what does that mean for the future of this company from a privacy and user data perspective? Now, the article does go and say that Meta is not just like getting rid of all these people. They're going to repurpose a lot of them, and some of them are even going to do a similar job to what they were doing in this responsible innovation team. But they're not going to be their own team anymore. So maybe it's not as dire as it sounds, because the Wall Street Journal, they're trying to get you to click on the article, and they got me talking about it, right? But yeah, I guess be aware. Meta maybe doesn't have the leash that it had internally, as long as that leash was.
Color me not surprised.
Yeah, right. So I don't, and again, right? Is this a cost savings things, or is it a we got sick of hearing from these people thing? Right. It's
Probably
just
a
as
little
likely
bit.
one or the other, right? Or a little bit of both. So yeah, that's that. Let's see. The next article is from The Verge, and I just included this one because it's really funny if you summarize it the right way. First of all, I didn't know this was a problem, right? So it's from The Verge. It's Tim Cook says, buy your mom an iPhone if you want a green bubble. Which, at face value, that title doesn't mean much until I thought about it, right? They're talking about when you're texting with somebody. Your phone's using iMessage and my phone's using iMessage, and you get the green bubble, which means it's encrypted, right? That you're talking to another
Yep.
iMessage user. And if it's blue, right? If it's a blue bubble, it means it was sent over SMS, which means it's unencrypted. It could have been eavesdropped on, that kind of thing. So apparently there's a new protocol that can be used for text messaging that makes it more secure, and it's called RCS. And I think the article implies that Android is looking at employing RCS. And the question to Tim Cook was, can't we make iPhone or iMessage do the same thing so that now I can chat securely with Android users as well? And Tim Cook basically responded with, I'd rather see them buy iPhones.
Of course he would.
Yeah, right. Of course he would, right? So, I have an Apple phone now. Everybody on the show tonight has an Apple phone. Obviously, I've accepted the Apple overlords, but I just thought this was really funny. Just buy an iPhone. Let them eat cake.
This is, yeah, not worth getting worked up about, in my
Yeah.
humble opinion.
No, I just thought it was funny. I thought it was a funny comment.
Yeah, it is
And
funny.
taken out of context, or like maybe there was context here we don't know about, but yeah, just buy them iPhones.
It's a pretty shallow article.
It is. All right. So, Jason, I know you've been patiently waiting. Oh, what?
Are you not aware of all the Google stuff that's been going on with RCS, whatever
I
it is?
I may not be.
The new
What's?
messaging standard. So Google's been basically trolling Apple at least for a couple
Oh.
weeks, maybe longer.
Okay.
That they need to switch to the RCS standard because then
Ah.
they can get rid of the green bubble and
So that's the backstory I didn't have. Okay.
yeah, and it's interoperability issues, like, yeah. And Tim Cook is like, he's if what, like, I don't know what goes on internally, but I mean, if he's saying that his customers aren't saying we want this, then they're not going to prioritize it. I mean, it's
Right. Why would they re-engineer their messaging stack?
I mean,
when it's
there's-
working fine for them.
There's certain times where it's like an ideological thing, but that doesn't necessarily sell iPhones, right?
Right.
Personally, like, I think the average iPhone user is not going to care. And that's exactly what Tim Cook is saying, right? But I think that from a technology standpoint, as a technology company, I would want to make my device more interoperable. But that's never been Apple's stance. They don't care about interoperability generally. They care about selling
but-
iPhones.
But RCS is not necessarily this glorious open standard the way Google has implemented it, is basically what the article says.
Okay.
yeah. I don't know much about the stand. Like, I don't know much about whether it is like an official standard or not. It may be just as much of a standard as iMessage is a standard.
Yeah.
What I can say is I intentionally bought an iPhone, and one of the reasons I converted to the iPhone is because of Apple's stance on privacy.
Yep.
They took very public stances which were politically risky
Yep.
among certain
Yep.
areas of the population to take.
That was
Like when you're like, no, we're not gonna crack open this terrorist's iPhone
right.
because we don't do that. We're not giving the FBI any sort of a backdoor or keys that could be used to. I mean, to me, I appreciate that stance.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's one of the selling points that moved me to iPhone. In fact, you may remember a couple years ago I moved to iPhone and then I moved back to Android. That was almost the primary reason I moved to iPhone, because that was right after that happened. And then for some reason I decided to go back to Android, and then I switched back anyway. So I don't know. That seems to be the way I do things anyway.
So whether or not that's still whether or not iMessage and the N10 encryption stuff is as black and white as it used to be versus using an Android, I don't know. But I feel more comfortable with the way Apple has the stances they've made, and they've put their money where their mouth is on this issue.
And I want to say that Google had taken a similar stance at one point, where an encrypted device was not something they were willing to unlock for authorities.
Yeah, but Google has done so many questionable
Yeah.
things around privacy, especially
On the
compared
other
to
side of
Apple.
that, yeah.
They're in a bigger hole for me for that.
Right. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm saying that on that specific issue, I believe they had the same stance. But
Yeah.
you're right. You are a product with Google, whereas with Apple, you're a customer.
I feel like a customer. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. With Google, it's all about trying to get you to buy other things or trying to get data out of you so that they can sell it to third parties or advertise at you, right? Whereas with Apple, they never take that stance. They just charge you more, right? So it's a trade-off,
okay.
right? Yeah.
I feel the same way about the money I give to Apple because I have Apple Music, I'll be honest, because it rocks. It works for me.
Yeah.
I've got the music I stream from them side by side with my MP3s that I ripped off of CDs using my iMac 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably longer than that, right?
Yeah.
But just like I don't regret a dollar I've ever given to the mouse because I'm now the adult Disney fan, I don't regret a dollar I've ever given to Apple.
Yeah. So, at any rate, the next article is more like a tweet. In fact, it is exactly a tweet. It's not like a tweet. It is a tweet. So, Jason, you added this in here.
It's got more content than the actual Apple RCS article.
It might.
Huh.
It's got a little more content than just a tweet. So apparently today, earlier today, Patreon made some changes to their staff and laid off their entire security team, including the, I believe she was like the head privacy or the head of security for Patreon, Emily Metcalf.
Okay.
So her and her entire team have been nuked. So if you're dealing with Patreon, just be aware that there's no security team.
So I feel like
Deal
there's
with that as you will.
I feel like there's
Crazy.
more here. Like there has to be more here.
Yeah.
They can't have just been
so-
like, nope, we don't care about security anymore. There must be more to this story. Like they're using a third party now or something.
Maybe. I mean, who knows? But generally speaking, when a company lays off their entire security team, that's not a good thing. I mean, speculation is run. I mean, you can say maybe they went to a third party doing it. Somebody internally still needs to kind of deal with some of that, so that you
Yeah.
can have somebody assigned to that, and that's usually
Yeah.
a security person.
Just,
My personal favorite that I said was perhaps they've just decided to put all the security responsibilities on the other team members because it's
Possible.
obviously cheaper to pay somebody you already have instead of hiring a new team to do security. So
Yeah.
save some money that way.
Well, I can tell you that
layoffs going on lately. So
I can tell you that we're going to keep an eye on it because obviously the show does use Patreon. We talk about it every show.
Yeah.
And we do not want folks to be using a service that we don't trust. So we're going to keep an eye on it and see what comes of this. I'm not going to immediately nope out of Patreon, but we're going to keep an eye on it. And folks, if anybody out there has more info, let us know because I'm interested in this because I use Patreon for a number of things. It's not just Iron Sysadmin. I am patrons. I am a patron for other things, right? And I don't want my data on a service that is not employing a security team, right? So, anyway,
Look, it's entirely possible that they have solved security and they don't need a security team.
that's it.
Right?
Solve problem. They don't need a security team anymore. That security team was so good, they put themselves out of a job.
Yeah, so somebody else suggested they move to a zero trust model.
So I found apparently a team member posted at 7:30 as a global platform. Patreon will always prioritize the security of our creators and customers' data as part of a strategic shift of a portion of a security program. We have parted ways with 5 employees. We also partner with a number of external orgs to continuously develop our security capabilities and conduct regular security assessments, ensure we meet or exceed the highest standards. The changes made this week will have no impact on our ability to continue to provide a secure and safe platform,
Yeah.
including the
they've
upcoming
outsourced it.
adult ID verification requirement. So it seems like if they really only laid off 5 people, that doesn't seem to be huge.
I think you're thinking that Patreon is a lot bigger than it may actually be. I mean, remember what
All right.
Patreon is. Like for instance, companies that I've worked for have the security department has 5 people, 6 people. You know, I don't think I've worked for a company that's had more than a dozen security engineers.
Okay.
So and that is very, very, very common.
Yeah.
You don't get massive, humongous security teams until you get into, Fortune 500, big companies with like some serious stuff to secure. And even then,
fair enough.
you'd be surprised on what's on the inside. So 5 people may have been. I mean, that's entirely possible. That was the whole team.
Okay.
Well, I think that's what the
I don't
implication
know.
is, that it's the entire team.
Yeah.
And I mean, but again, even if it was the entire team, if they're leveraging a third party now, sure, they don't have the in-house talent. It just means they chose to outsource that, which is a common business decision, right?
Or they were friggin' idiots and they now don't have anybody who knows security.
Yeah, I hope that's not true.
Working at like we're in a gap.
Even if
Who knows?
even if you've outsourced your security, you still need people internally to handle things, right?
Yeah,
So,
but maybe so imagine when you and I were at the college. We didn't have an official security group, so you and I picked up a lot of that stuff. Maybe they've got you and I there. And they
Or
work
maybe
with
they
work
have-
with the third party people,
Or they have contractors,
Right.
who are doing the security,
Right.
Like they
Yeah,
look
well,
like
like I said,
employees,
you know,
but they're
it's-
not employees.
right.
We don't know.
Right. Yeah, outsourced. They've hired Accenture. God help them.
Oh,
And-
good
and,
lord!
that's their entire team.
Canceling my patrons.
Time to move to
Yeah,
OnlyFans.
This is not to not to shock people and tell them to run away from Patreon. Just be aware. That
No,
this is,
that's exactly my point. I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to keep an eye on this, and folks, especially our patrons, if you guys if you don't feel
don't stop giving us money.
yeah, right, don't stop giving us money. If you feel like Patreon's the wrong choice for our show, let me know. And I don't know where else we would go, to be honest, other than some kind of direct donation
Coffee.
system. Coffee? Oh, that's right. There is another one. Wasn't it called like Buy Me a Coffee or something?
It's ko-fi.com, I believe.
Ko-fi. Anyway, if we need to move off Patreon, we will. But I'm not gonna quickly move off Patreon.
I would not knee jerk at this point.
No, I wouldn't do jerk either.
Something has happened to Jason's video. We still hear you though, so it's okay, since it is an audio podcast.
But I see my video. You don't have my video. This has happened before. Mark, do you still see my video in Riverside?
No.
No.
Looks
Okay.
like a bandwidth thing. It cut out your video to save bandwidth. Anyway, we're almost done with the show for tonight. Anyway, so folks, yeah, if anybody has any commentary on the Patreon thing, please reach out. Let me know. But I'm going to keep an eye on it.
I would like to apologize to all the listeners of the podcast for my video going out.
Yeah,
they
right.
they
don't
may
care.
they may actually be
They're still
thanking us
crack-
for you not having video.
They're still cracking up from when you were a Cylon.
Yeah, right. Right. That was great. That's going to be great to edit later. It's going to be just awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just
You're
the gift that
screwed.
keeps on giving.
You are the gets just yeah. Yeah. It's my own fault for saying there weren't any emergencies this show. So instead, we just get screwed over with audio and video problems. All right, I think that's it for the news for tonight. And to be honest, I've got kids that have to get to bed because they have school tomorrow. So I need to wrap up the show and get some story time in. So thanks for watching, folks, if you're watching live. If you're not watching live and you'd like to, you can check us out on both YouTube and Twitch. There are links to both of those in the show notes. Or you can go to ironsystemin.com and get to either. If you want to join our Discord community, you can do so as well. There's a link for that in the show notes or on ironsystemin.com. Are you catching a theme here? You can also find us on social media and see whenever we're going to go live or do stuff or talk to us or whatever on the Face and the Twitters. As long as Facebook stays in business. Feels like we're getting close.
Just search for Steel Sysamin.
Yeah, right. Steel. No, iron.
Copper
It's
Sysamin?
no. See, we don't have a smelter, so it's iron. It's not steel because you need a smelter, right, to make steel. Isn't that like iron and something else? Iron and carbon or something.
Iron spelled Fe. No?
What?
Okay.
Anyway,
I'll shut up now.
where were we? Oh, right. We were closing the show up. I think that's everything, folks. And again, if you want to support us, you can do it on Patreon, at least for the moment. All right. Any final thoughts while I find the closing page?
I'm good.
You're good? Jason,
Sure.
are you going to talk like a Cylon?
I am also good.
By your command.
All right,
Is there a
folks.
setting in this thing?
What's that? Is there a Cylon
I
setting?
can
You're going to
change-
find out.
I don't know. I can change. No, there's no silent setting.
There is a second battle star.
There should totally be a Cylon
Pegasus
setting.
shows up.
I'll have to
Yeah.
create a new preset for Cylon.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Whatever you're doing, and we will catch you in the next one. Everybody, have a good one.
Cut it out. We're gonna get DMCA'd.
all right, folks. Good night.
Yeah, we don't.